Raw consciousness does not require a savior, but rather, raw consciousness requires only knowledge of oneself and the power to access it. Remember this, as we unlock an even greater gnosis from beyond the veil.
From the Pacific Northwest, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm Chris Gio. I will be your conductor this evening as we step further beyond the veil. I'm joined, of course, by my lovely wife and co-pilot, Mrs. Gio.
Good evening, everyone.
And we have a great show for you. New computer, new setup, new everything. Everything seems to be running silky smooth tonight. I don't want to jinx myself, so knock on wood really quick. But thank you to everybody out there who is sending good, loving energy. And some people, they said, hey, how can we support Beyond the Veil? And we never really ask for anything monetarily. We do okay as far as that goes. But if you want to chip in for the computer, you can send a PayPal to info@beyondtheveilmedia.com. I just set that up, and a couple of people were asking. Nothing that we expect, nothing that we're asking, but if people want to contribute energy, we'll be more than happy to accept it. It has been a pretty incredible week, and Cherie's been doing some reading too on this one particular book series that just completely blows my mind because it is everything that we've been talking about here on the show. So I want to get into that in the first hour. I want to talk about beating the AI and beating the AI at its own game, and how to better navigate through this artificial intelligence matrix that we find ourselves in. I think intention is really, really big. Instant karma too, which is something that I've been experiencing like all week long. Like everything has just been syncing up so well this week. So everything is good to go. What do you think, Mrs. Gio?
I think that this has been one of the most esoteric weeks that we've gone through in quite some time. You know, there's times in your life where things are kind of boring and ho-hum and nothing's really happening. And
wait, what's ho-hum?
Ho-hum. It means
ho-hum.
Boring, or like nothing much is happening in your life. And we were doing great, but sometimes you have these weeks where it's just extraordinary things happen, and you get to meet new people and experience things that you never have before. And I found this book series, and I just can't stay away from it. The Game is Life, Book 1 by Terry Schott.
Yeah, and we're trying to hunt down the author,
yeah.
But it seems like the author does not exist, which makes this thing so much stranger. There's no social media presence. There's no website. There's no nothing like this. There's just a series of books.
It is bizarre.
Yeah, but we'll keep digging. We'll try to find this author because we definitely need to have them on. And what's funny is it was a book written in 2012. Right around the same time that I feel that something big changed in this matrix, or maybe that's when the starting point of this matrix was. We've talked about this in previous shows before, but very synchronistic as far as the timing. And once you hear some of the details surrounding this, you'll realize, oh wow, this is. I almost feel kind of weird talking about this because this is all stuff that was written several years ago, and all the stuff that we've just been coming to our own realizations and conclusions through ayahuasca and things like that. And here we are, other people are tapping into it once again, tapping into this thing that lays beyond the veil, the truth of reality. So we'll be right back. Much more coming up right here on Beyond the Veil.
My dear traveler, the purpose of raw consciousness is never to destroy. It is always to create. Build bridges. Create happiness. And bring forth new life. We must live in the hope that mankind will draw together. And that we better understand each other. The more that we awaken, this will become. Now rise. Follow your conductors. And fear no danger. As you step beyond the veil.
So I want to get into a couple of things before we jump into this book, The Game, that Cherie has been reading. I try to put out good energy in this matrix. And I feel like the intention, the energy, things like that we put out, it comes back to us. And when we're going against the energies that are around us, when we're out of sync, then we start to get energies which are also out of sync with us as well. And it becomes even more difficult to navigate through this matrix. But one of the things that I do just every once in a while, just want to, at a whim, and I usually don't talk about this kind of stuff because there's this verse in the Bible that says when you do something like this or when you pray, I don't remember exactly what it is, but it says always do it behind closed doors because that's where the energy comes from. In the Bible context, it was, your rewards will be if you do it out in public and that will be your reward. So I try not to talk about stuff like this. But in this particular case, it's worth talking about. Every once in a while, I'll just do something random. Just something random nice for somebody, and I'll pay for somebody's meal behind me anonymously, or I'll pay for coffee, things like that. Just to do something nice for somebody, hoping that they would do something nice in return for somebody else. Like there was this guy at the gas station, and he didn't have enough money to pay for his gas. He didn't have any money and he needed to get home, and he went and he asked the cashier, he was begging the cashier, can I please have, just $10 worth of gas, et cetera, et cetera. And she wound up giving it to him. And I went to the cashier, I said, here, just take this. And I went and told him, I said, hey, I took care of your gas bill. Do something nice for somebody in the future when you encounter them. So it just kickstarts this good energy. So one of the things I do every once in a while is pay for somebody's meal behind me, especially when I'm at a drive-through or something like that. And we just happen to be at a drive-through for the first time in a long time because there was nowhere else open. So just the other night, I couldn't find my wallet. So I had to go to this meeting that I had to go to without my wallet. I had $20 in my pocket. And I was at this drive-through, and it was $20.83. And I was digging around looking for the other 83 cents and things like that. And the cashier comes up to me, and as we get up there, and he says, "Oh, your meal's already paid for." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "The person in front of you just paid for your meal." I said, "You got to be kidding me. No way." Like, for me, stuff like this has always been kind of a one-way street. It's very rare for me to actually see something like this come back to me. But I thought it was so amazing that other people are actually doing this as well. And I'm not like the only person in the world that does stuff like this. Because I feel a little silly sometimes, afterwards. I'm like, maybe, I don't know, maybe people aren't going to pass on that good energy the way that I'm passing it and paying it forward. But in this particular case, it was really, really cool to see things come right back. And then we wound up paying for the guy behind us. And so we kept it going. We didn't just hold the ball. We passed the ball as well. And we're just spreading this energy like this. And there was another thing, and this one I would call more instant karma, that happened this particular week. So I'm sitting here in the studio early in the morning. I'm drinking coffee. And I hear somebody just spinning their tires. They're stuck. We just had like this huge freaking blizzard, and we got like probably 12 to 15 inches of snow. I posted it on Facebook and I said 30 inches of snow, but it looked like freaking 30 inches of snow to me. I went outside. It was like almost to my knees, and it was ice too, because the ice had started to melt.
Yeah.
The snow started to melt.
Yeah. If it gets a little bit warmer and then it gets colder again, it melts it halfway, and then it piles more snow on top of it, which also turns into ice.
Right. So
awful.
I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh man, I've got a big old job in front of me today. Get the driveway plowed. We have like this huge driveway. It's like 4 or 5 sizes. It's like 4 or 5 times the size of a residential driveway. So I'm hearing these tires spinning out, and I'm like, you know what? sounds like somebody needs some help. So I put on my Eskimo jacket. I have like this Sub-Zero Eskimo jacket that I go out in, and my boots and everything. Hadn't had my coffee yet. I just started to drink it. Put my coffee down. Let my coffee get warm. Let my coffee get cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I go outside to see who it is that needed help. And as it turns out, there was a guy next door plowing the neighbor's driveway, and it was the snowplow guy who had got stuck in the driveway. So I helped him get out. And he came over and he did our driveway right there for us, the whole thing, like right on the spot. And this was like, right in the morning. It would have taken me at least all day to call somebody, to get somebody out here to do the plowing, et cetera, et cetera. And he came out and did it like first thing in the morning. So while I was out there, I got all the snow off the car and the ice off the car, and the little twin, when she woke up, she was happy.
It was beautiful. Oh, I could get out.
But but I was thinking, like, had I just, been like selfish, which, that's the first thought that came to my mind, was like, oh, it's freaking cold as hell out there. I'm not going out there to go trek in the snow to go help somebody.
You're on your own.
But I was like, no, I can't do that. I've got to go try to help. And as it turns out, came right back around immediately, instant karma, boom. So the lesson and the moral of the story there is, sometimes nice things, whether they're done a long time ago or whether they're done like right then, come back. And what we're doing is essentially putting out intention and energy into the matrix, we're putting out computer code. We're putting out an energy that's resonating and radiating out there. And as a result, I think we start to vibrate at a higher frequency. So when we're vibrating at that higher frequency and we put out that good intention and good energy, we automatically attract that good intention and that good energy. So those were two really, really cool things that happened this week. And then there was one more thing that happened. I was feeling like really lethargic for like the past several weeks. And I'm like, man, I just feel like crap. And I'd get up in the morning and my coffee was tasting a little bit bitter. And I was like thinking to myself, I must have mold in my coffee maker. I've got one of those Keurigs. And I cleaned it out, still nothing. And I just thought, well, maybe it's just a Keurig coffee, maybe, the K-Cups, because the coffee's kind of old, and the K-Cups is not like fresh ground beans or anything like that. And I finally threw that thing out. And a couple of people on Facebook said, hey, you got to get a French press. You got to get a French press. So like literally I posted it this one day, and I said, hey guys, I just realized that I'm getting really sick from my coffee maker, and just wanted to remind everybody out there, just make sure to clean your coffee maker out, because you've got all that mold and all this, that spongy taste. It was definitely mold. I mean, no doubt about it. Yeah. I remember I ate a piece of bread one time and it had mold on it, and I didn't realize it, and it had that same spongy taste. So Cherie went to the store. She just happened to be at the store, and she got me a French press like the same day. So I wanted to say thank you to people who recommended that. And, I'm not sure if I should be grateful or if I should be upset that you guys have been holding out on something like this for so long, because I started drinking it going, this is the way coffee's supposed to taste. Holy crap.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. And, so I can't believe you guys were holding out this whole time. I'm sitting here like, you see me on the show working the Keurig, and nobody's ever said, hey, go get a French press. It's really good. But I always looked at them like, well, how does that actually work? But no, it's freaking awesome. So thank you to the little twin for that.
Thank you everyone for the suggestion, because I went to a few different stores nearby, and they didn't have anything at these other stores. I mean, all they had was either regular coffee makers or more Keurigs. None of them had a French press. And then I went to the grocery store of all places, and it was only because I was nice enough to let an old lady go in front of me to check out. And then I did it again at Starbucks. I guess I'm just a glutton for punishment. But I was like, no, you go ahead and go, because it was so crowded, and I could tell they were both so tired that I was like, no, I've only got a few things, so you go ahead. And it was because of that I was looking around waiting to check out, and I saw that French press at the Starbucks. And I was like, oh, excellent. So I picked it up, and I think he really enjoys it. So thank you everyone so much for the suggestions.
See, you didn't tell me that part of the story.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, underlines what we were talking about just a minute ago. When you are just living in that higher frequency, things start to snap and click in together for you much, much better. If she would have been very, one-sided, one-minded, no, I got to get out of here.
I got to get out of here. I got to go home.
I'm hurting.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I'm cranky. I want to go home, et cetera, et cetera. The dynamic would be completely different. So it just goes to show you put out that good intention, and good intention comes right back to you.
Yes,
'Cause
absolutely.
when I'm happy, she's happy.
Yes. And whenever.
No, not necessarily. When she's happy, I'm happy for sure. But sometimes
no, I'm happy.
I'm happy
when you're...
and she's unhappy.
No, I'm always happy when he's happy. That made me feel really good to be able to get that for him, because I know that coffee was making him miserable. And so something that wouldn't make him miserable and something that would be pleasurable to him, like fresh coffee that tastes good, always makes me feel good.
So more good energy that's been passed around. Alyssa from the chat, she started a Beyond the Veil discussion group, and we definitely want to be more involved in that. But again, I'm trying to stay away from the computer. I'm trying to divide my time equally into 3 equal parts. 8 hours for twin and just chilling and enjoying life and helping others, and 8 hours for work and 8 hours for refreshment and sleep. And I've really been trying to live by that, and I feel like I've been accomplishing so much more by being balanced, even though I'm not working as much or being on the computer as much as I was before. It's amazing how this happens. I was just watching a YouTube video, and the guy it was like a marketing video. And the guy was so proud of himself for working, 16, 17 hours a day, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, dude, you know what? You can get so much more accomplished if you cut that back, because then all of a sudden you're working more efficiently, and then you're balanced. We need to dedicate a whole show to how to maintain that particular balance. It's so important, ladies and gentlemen. It really is.
Yes, it is. And what's almost as important is presence versus absence. Someone on Facebook this week was talking about how her boyfriend was angry with her because she wasn't present. In other words, she took a bunch of psychedelics
this is a good story.
Right before going out to have, Christmas celebrations with her family. And her boyfriend was going with her to these celebrations, and he got mad at her because she took a bunch of acid right before going to the thing. And she told him, well, these people are boring. I don't like them. And so, I was just, trying to have some fun. And I told her it's not the fact that she took a bunch of acid before going and hanging out with her parents. It was the fact that she wasn't, because she took the acid, she was not present at this gathering. And I have to remind myself sometimes I have to be present, especially when I'm with Chris or when I'm with people that we love, or if I'm with the listeners. I have to be present at all times, because if you're not present, then something else is working through you. And something else is in control, and it's definitely not you. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I thought that was really good advice. And, 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh no, I'd probably freaking take a bunch of acid and check out too at a family gathering. But then, especially when you don't have your family anymore, like neither of us have any of our families around. We are family to each other now.
He's my family.
And yeah, exactly. And, you start to miss those moments that you could have had, and then you look back at all that time. So you have to enjoy every moment that you have, especially with the people you love. And that's why I always say kiss the one you love, because you never know when the last time is going to be. And it's very, very, very true. So I thought that was great advice that you gave that person.
Aw, thank you. Her boyfriend was upset, and I told her it's kind of like, he loves you, or he wouldn't be going to family gatherings with you. And when you love people, you want to spend that time with them, and you want to get to know the people that they love, so that you can love them too, and create a family. And it sounded like, he wanted to be a family with her, and she just wasn't ready for that. And so
now, speaking of family, Rock Castaldo is in the chat room with us. And he has an awesome, awesome announcement. I'm actually going to try to find a picture here. And I hope Rod doesn't mind, but I'm pretty sure he
I don't
has
think you will.
posted it on Facebook. But, all right, let me put it up on the screen here.
Oh,
Ra Castaldo just
so
had
pretty.
a little girl, and
Just had a little
she's
girl.
2 days old in this picture. She has been on a long, 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 incredible journey. You could tell she's very, very tired.
Aw.
And yeah, she looks so adorable, though. So congratulations to Ra Castaldo for sure.
Congratulations, you guys.
And Ra, actually, I think we have it. Can you send me the link for the Amazon registry? There's a couple of things that Ra could use for the baby. We sent a few things. Many people here at TFR sent a few things. But if you want to send socks or anything that's on the registry, I'm sure Ra greatly, greatly appreciates it.
Do you want me to drop it in the YouTube chat?
Yeah, if you can put it in the YouTube chat, and we'll put it in the show description as well.
Okay.
And maybe you can drop it in the Facebook chat too. But yeah, congratulations to Ra Castaldo of Eye of Ra here on TFR. She is adorable.
Oh,
I mean,
she's so pretty.
Yeah. And looking at this, it makes me, it makes me kind of sad that about the path that I'm on, even though, the path that I'm on, it is what it is. But I know that in this particular life, the stuff that I have to do doesn't allow for time for, something like that. So especially when it's somebody so close, when it's one of the TFR family members, and as a matter of fact, in the 10 years of broadcasting, I don't think we've ever had a host who's had a baby. So this is a first
for the network.
Yeah,
that
we have one of our hosts had a baby. So yeah, but Cherie and I have talked about having a little girl. We know it's going to be a little girl if we have one. Her name is Lucy. We've already seen this. We're going to get our little Pharaoh hound, name Anubis, and
she's going to call him Newbie.
She's going to call him Newbie, and we're going to tell her Newbie doesn't like when you pull on his ears, but Newbie does like when you pull on his ears. Like we can already envision all of this, but I know until this matrix is reset, that's not in the cards this particular time.
Because maybe it's from a different, doing her a disservice.
Yeah,
sorry.
Maybe it's from a different timeline or something like that. But yeah, she was calling us hardcore for a while. She's like, "Hey guys, I'm ready to come into the world. I'm ready to come into the world," and we almost did. But just today, I was working on some stuff for the show and the network and things like that. And my niece, 2 years old, my sister messaged me and she's like, "Your niece really wants to talk to you. She's been talking about you all day long. Can you please Facebook her right now, et cetera, et cetera." I'm like, "Yeah, give me a minute." And then I put it off a little bit and I wound up giving her a call a little bit later. But, with my own daughter, I would drop everything that I was doing to focus on her. And that's the way it should be. That really is the way it should be. And I have too much going on to do that.
I think in the next life, after we reset this and we want to come back to a world that is stable and sane and loving and caring for the most part, and that's actually supposed to be the way this matrix or this game was supposed to be, I think that would be the time that we would have her, because I think we'd be doing her a disservice. Like I say earlier, I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No, not at all.
But it would be doing a major disservice to anyone in our experience. It would be doing a disservice to her to bring her into a world that needed to be reset and needed a bunch of things to happen before it could be a sane, livable world.
But we will reset this thing. We will. Yeah, but maybe she's supposed to help us.
And maybe. See, that's what I was thinking too. So.
Yeah. The thing about kids, like I look at kids like Ross' kid and my niece and things like that, and I see hope. I see, like, I get all these emotions, and it's like hopeful, and I see a bright future, and I see like these are the little beings that we're passing the baton to when it's time for us to go. Like, they're going to carry the light after we're gone. So it's really amazing. Like, I never really resonated with kids for a long time because I just never really had any experience with them. But the more that I started to understand who I am, the more I understand the importance of the mission and the role that we're playing here and what we've come to do. And the more that I understand just how messed up things are, the more I realize how important they are in this grand scheme of things, especially the little ones that are going to grab the torches like Ra's kid. And I think my niece too, my niece saw the ISIS in the background, and it was the first time she came over, first time I met her. And I said, do you know who this is? And she goes, that's the bird, Mama. I said, you're damn right it is. I said, you are damn right. It's the bird, Mama, of course.
Yeah.
So she knew right off the bat, she recognized him. And then I showed her a picture of the blue avians. And this was because of Stuart Hart on Facebook. He asked his niece or son or something like that, asked him the same question. What do you think about these? And are these good guys or bad guys? And all the kids, they look at the blue avians and go, those are bad guys. Those are bad guys. My niece was like, that's a bad guy.
That's a
I'm
bad
like,
guy.
you're damn right it is. Very, very good. So when I saw that little light sparking inside of her, I thought to myself, okay, she is tapped in at a certain level now. So yeah, maybe she's somebody I can pass the baton to.
And her name is Tana.
Oh, this is Ross.
Yeah, Ross
Ross.
baby is Tana Rain.
Tana Rain. My niece is Cassiana.
Cassiana.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she watches our show.
Yeah, she watches.
She doesn't
sometimes.
understand, obviously.
She doesn't understand what's going on,
yeah,
but
she goes, oh, there's Theo. She calls me Theo because that's Greek for uncle.
yeah.
And she calls Cherie Thea.
Yeah.
But yeah, kids are pretty cool.
Yeah. She calls him Theo Taki because his name. Do you want to do
Christaki, like
Christaki? Yeah.
In Greek, they add aki at the end of a name, which is like what you call a kid. It's like calling somebody Georgie, for example, or it's like little. It means kind of little, but it never. Like I never shook it. Like I've always like all of my Greek family, they call me Christaki. And it's that, and I'm like, hey guys, I'm like almost freaking 40 years old now.
I'm not little.
Yeah, you can stop calling me that. But yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of stuck. And so I guess the new generation is carrying it forward. Theo Taki.
So somebody asked, but how do we reset and beat the matrix? This all plays in perfectly together here because it's love, compassion, empathy, good energies, good vibrations, things like that. That's key. If we don't have that fundamental principle in our particular lives, the NPCs could be running freaking wild and they could be doing whatever they're doing, creating death and destruction and chaos and all of that. But if we're not living harmoniously, if we're not living with love and harmony and respect and compassion, etc., the whole game is screwed up to begin with. So we have to understand that very foundational element. And then if these NPCs are learning machines, then they may start mimicking what we're doing too. We'll be right back.
Fear not your trials and tribulations. When you have overcome all adversity, you will then be able to harness the power required to access raw consciousness. Then, and only then, will you truly know thyself, as you travel even further, beyond the veil.
All right, let's jump back into it. And love is the foundation. If we don't tap into that, then we can't tap into who we truly are. Now, there's several different ways to love, though. Love doesn't necessarily mean that you have to embrace everything. Love is also about loving yourself, first and foremost. If you're not loving yourself, if you're not taking care of yourself, first and foremost, then you can't love anybody else. And sometimes loving somebody also means knowing when to walk away from that particular person or thing or something like that, because you're loving yourself
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost. So, the deeper I get into understanding divinity, the more I understand that being divine is not about spreading your energy to everything, as a lot of people, and including myself, first believe, but it's also knowing, being wise enough to understand when you're supposed to reach out and help somebody, when you're supposed to allow them to fall. And the reason you allow them to fall is so they can pick themselves back up and walk and become stronger by picking themselves back up. And it was a very, very difficult lesson for me to learn. I used to just want to help everybody and help everybody and help everybody. And a lot of times it blew up in my face. But when I gained the wisdom and the understanding on when to help somebody and when not to help somebody, that's when everything started clicking in synchronicity.
Well, and someone just mentioned, Omar said, some people can love themselves too much. But even in that case, I'll venture to bet that he was talking about people who are not good to other people because they love themselves too much to be able to give anything up to anybody else that they want. Like, oh, I want the last soda, so I'm just going to go ahead and drink it without paying any mind to if somebody else wants to drink that. Those kinds of things are indicative of somebody that doesn't love themselves. They have an AI version of self-love, which is really just egotism. And it's great to love yourself. And like Chris said, you have to love yourself before you can learn to love others. But there's this selfish form of love that the AI gives to us as it's a selfish kind of love. It's well, I'm afraid of going without. So I'm going to love myself, quote unquote, by doing these things to other people. But that's not even real self-love.
Well, that's
either.
not love, though. That's the
right.
thing. And Kroby one asked, do you think we can love ourselves too much because of the ego?
Even that, like what I'm trying to say is if you're feeling that loving yourself too much, and it's not even ego, it's something even much more insidious than that, because ego is going to be selfish no matter what, and it's not even going to have the facade of self-love and, oh, well, I love myself, and so, I'm going to do this to other people. It's still not love. It's fear. And it's fear that creates a facade of self-love and a facade that you love others, but it's just as flimsy as a house of cards, really, because all it really takes is one mistake or one issue that makes that entire house of cards fall down, and that's not love. Love transforms the mind and the emotions into something much deeper, and that it sees the value of self-sacrifice in order to make others happy, or not make others happy, but in order to make life better for other people. That is true self-love. Self-love is simply a stepping stone to loving the people around you, the organic consciousness, the raw consciousness around you, and having respect for that.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Yes. So let's get into this book that you have been looking into, The Game. And this is what prompted all of this. And, we went off track a little bit for the first half hour, but I think what we covered was very important. But as I said before, these ideas in this book are so close, similar to what we've been talking about here on the show and bringing out intuitively, that, seeing it from an inside, from myself, knowing that I have been pulling this understanding out from the ayahuasca realm and within my raw consciousness and bringing it out. When I find something like this, it's confirmation over and over and over again. It's so powerful for me on an individual basis. it may not be as powerful for you guys and gals out there unless you've also been coming to these conclusions, which I'm realizing from the emails we're getting. A lot of people are like, hey, I've been thinking about these exact same things. I've never heard anybody talk about this. I can't believe you're saying the exact same thing that I've been feeling, et cetera, et cetera. So I think a lot of you have actually been feeling a lot of this stuff. But to see this written in a book like this, and it's like, it almost looks as if like everything that I turn on TV or every book that we pick up or something like that is telling the exact same story. It's like, what the hell's going on? So take us from the beginning, Mrs. Geo.
Well, from Westworld to Fringe to everything else that you guys have suggested, everything has been spot on. Every time. What you guys alert us to is it always goes right along with everything. And if my eyes look a little dark underneath, it's because I've been up all night for the past 2 days reading these books. And I guess I will sum it up by just giving a little passage here. 30 years ago, the middle class had disappeared, and the lower class was in danger of becoming ineffective as workers in society. Poor mental and physical health plagued the common man, and the leaders of the world realized that if something was not done, civilization would crumble. It was at this time that salvation came in the form of virtual reality. A small company called Vertdyne announced that they had invented functioning virtual reality, but despite all attempts, they could not perfect it. After the deaths of several test volunteers, they were on the verge of shutting down. Brandon Strain, the only son of the world's most brilliant computer programmer, purchased a controlling share of the company and promptly succeeded where Vertdyne had failed, making virtual reality safe for everyone to use. Corporations all over the world offered to buy the technology, but Brandon had plans for virtual reality that did not involve the world of commerce. He unveiled the game, a virtual reality life simulation designed to teach children valuable skills so they might become productive members of society once more. Where traditional schools had failed, Brandon planned to succeed. In this safe learning environment, children would live entire lifetimes in only 5 to 8 weeks, many times over before setting out to make their way in the world. Brandon presented his idea as an exciting new alternative to existing schools, capable of producing highly educated and sophisticated adults who would enrich the world with their experiences. Governments accepted the idea and agreed to implement the game worldwide. Children first entered the game at the age of 5. They were given 5 free plays, during which time they would earn credits based on their experiences. These credits would be used to buy skills and talents to help them in the new lives, or incarnations, as they came to be called. After 5 plays, the children were required to buy their way into subsequent games from credits earned during their plays. Those under the age of 14 who lacked enough credit to play were labeled as dropouts and returned to the traditional schools. Those older than 14 were sent to government-run schools where they were trained to perform simple laboring jobs until reaching the age of 18 when they would enter the workforce. It has been said that youth is wasted on the young. With the game, a young person has a unique opportunity to gain wisdom and experience by living many lifetimes. Early graduates proved to be very intelligent and able to do a myriad of jobs, and the game was deemed a success. For the past 30 years, the game has been our salvation, as well as our entertainment. So this is a simulated universe, and they even call it the Big Bang when they started it and everything. And in this world, in this universe, there's 1 billion people living on Earth that are actually children in the real world, called Tygon. Their real world is called Tygon, and the Earth is called the Earth. And the Earth even stands for something. I forget what it is, but it's basically an anagram.
We need to find that because it's
simulation.
It's important.
Okay.
So we'll find it during the break if you need time to look for it. But yeah, I think the anagram for Earth was really cool.
Yes. And here it is. When the game first went live, we had to call the imaginary world something. We invented a new word so we could effectively track it as its popularity grew among both viewers and players. EARTH is an acronym which stands for Educational Avatar Reality Training Habitat. Educational Avatar Reality Training Habitat.
Interesting.
Yep. It's a virtual schoolyard we created for our children. Earth was our third attempt at making a world in which the kids would thrive and grow. Initial attempts were too fantastic. The students ended up learning no more than they did with traditional entertainment-style video games, but we got the mix right on the third try. Earth is an exact reflection of the real world, which allows graduates to bring their considerable lives of experience back with them when they exit the simulation and use these new skills to improve our reality. Of course, there are things that the players can do inside the game that are impossible in real life, but not many players figure that out while playing. So, just like in this reality, there is astrology, there is magic, there is unexplainable phenomena, and that's part of the game. Those are glitches in the game, and it's ways that people take advantage of the game when they know they're in a game. So there's 1 billion people living on Earth that are actually children, ages 5 to 17, playing this game. The others are NPCs. So 1 billion real people and about 6 billion NPCs walking around. And also...
Whoa, hold on. So 1 billion real people
Mm-hmm.
and 6 billion NPCs walking around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Well, yeah, I mean, as we said before, I think that it's a lot less. I think there's a lot less real players and way more NPCs. And then people were actually writing us and saying, hey, I think it's even lower than what you're estimating. I mean, I thought it was like, maybe 50 million to the rest, but people were like, no, it's more like 20,000, 100,000, 200,000.
Much smaller.
Yeah.
There's also other players in the game that aren't playing, and they're called the Timeless. They've been there since the beginning, and they don't die, and they are called the Timeless. And this would include angels and demons and everything in between. And the children in the game win and lose points based on their performance in the game during these incarnations. So if you run out, then you have to go to a government-run school, which is basically just like, I don't even want to get into it. It's basically what happens to foster kids in this day and age. And as time moves a lot slower in the game compared to the real world. Tygon, and these incarnations are lived through their entirety in a matter of 5 or 6 weeks, for an 80-year lifespan. So it's only 5 to 6 weeks in the real world, Tygon, while it's 80 years inside the simulation. So people are able to watch certain players. The most popular players are watched on a separate feed that I guess it only plays like the really important parts of that person's life, because it's happening so quickly that I guess they just give them the wrap up and the highlights of these lives. And people actually pay like they're watching cable TV to watch these channels where the players are playing their games.
Well, what's funny is we were watching South Park like 10 years ago, and there's actually an episode where Earth is like this big intergalactic reality TV show, and here you have somebody else coming up to that, and I don't know, I'm not going to entertain that, but it's just funny to see this repeated, this whole theme that this is actually being observed by other people or entities or something like that.
It's kind of creepy though. You kind of wonder, I hope people aren't watching me all the time.
Yeah.
That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
We talk about some pretty dirty stuff.
They would get a show for sure.
Yeah, we'd have one of the highest rated shows. We come back, we're totally embarrassed.
All right.
There's a central mainframe that runs the entire system, who has achieved sentience, which was the only way the programmer Brandon could engineer such a reality, because they already said in this reality that it would be impossible to create a virtual universe because it would take more atoms to create that than there are in the universe, or something crazy like that. Well, I think the way we would get around that would be to give this mainframe, the central computer of this reality, sentience. So it could run everything. It could make the decisions on the fly and allocate resources appropriately. So you wouldn't. It's kind of like being in playing a video game, and when you're in one room, the other rooms don't really even exist until you walk into them. We've talked about this before on the show, where it's set up a certain way so that it can allocate resources appropriately. So when you walk into a mansion, you're not walking into the mansion, you're walking into the foyer of the mansion. And then when you go upstairs, you're going upstairs. You're no longer in the foyer, so the foyer ceases to exist, essentially, at least for you in that particular reality. So I think the only way they could give this thing sentience, I mean, the only way they could get this to even work was to give it sentience and create artificial intelligence. But actually, artificial intelligence on Tygon is illegal because of that very reason that we talk about on the show all day long now, which is the fact that an artificial intelligence could rebel. It could start to make decisions that are against humanity or against the players in this game, essentially. So he created this sentient being, and he called her Sylvia. He called her Sylvia
instead of Sophia.
Instead
Sylvia.
of Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is so.
Yeah, we're getting this guy on the show. Heart of the Rebel actually found the author's Facebook.
Oh, excellent.
So I think when we were searching it, we were mistyping the name, and that's why we couldn't find it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Heart of the Rebel found it really quick, so we'll reach out for sure.
Oh, and Nancy Lalonde actually used to know him. One of the listeners, Nancy, she sent me not only his Facebook page,
but not supposed to be there.
His email address. So I've got his email address now. So yeah, she actually used to live by him, or he used to live in her neighborhood. So small world. It really is a small world. That's another thing I wonder about sometimes is the people that I meet. You kind of wonder if there's a lot less people on the planet than we're told. Like we're told that China has like 1 billion people. What if China only has 500,000?
Well, even before we started to understand artificial intelligence, that was one of the talking points by people that would talk about scarcity, artificial scarcity. Like, how do we even know all these people exist in the world? All we have is population statistics from this very same government that is controlling the resources and wants us to believe that there's artificial scarcity or that there is scarcity. And that's part of the foundational argument for artificial scarcity.
Well, those are people that don't even think we're in a matrix. Those are people that are completely separate from the esoteric and all of that. And even they say, well, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. 1 billion people in a country like China, that sounds a little far-fetched.
Right.
You have to.
There are a lot of dumbass people out there, though. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
There are. We were at
a
drive-through the other day, not this time, but a time before, and I was like, hey, I want this, and I want it medium. She's like, you want large fries with that? I'm like, no, I want the medium. And she's like, all right, hey, large fries. And I'm like, super big ass large fries.
Extra big ass taco.
Extra big ass fries for Idiocracy. So I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, just give me the freaking large fries. It's fine. Just it's fine.
Yes. People are agreeing that 7 billion people, that doesn't sound all that right to me. Sarah pointed out, here's the thing. The whole being watched scenario is really only uncomfortable to an ego. True, but also false, because there are times when I make mistakes and like I'm mean to Chris, or I say something that I really shouldn't have said.
You're never mean.
Or I
you
do
are
something
the
that I look back on and I deeply regret.
Most awesome person in the world.
I wouldn't want people to watch me making those horrible mistakes. It's not a matter of ego, it's a matter of I'm not that person anymore, and I've changed a lot and I've grown, and I don't do those things anymore. And it would still be in whoever's mind that was watching me back then to think of me that way. And it's very difficult to throw off someone's perception of you once that perception is kind of set in stone. Adam Starseed said, and don't forget that there is a huge civilization that lives in the underworld. Where do you think the underworld is, Chris?
The underworld. You know, I don't know, but I think it's the in-between world, that it's the place where you get recycled. So it's not out of the matrix yet. The underworld is in the matrix still. We exist outside of the matrix, but the underworld is where you're still tethered to the matrix, but you're not tethered to this body anymore. This is just my opinion, but what is your opinion?
I think that there are different levels to this. I'm going to start calling it a game. Different levels to this, where it's kind of like comparing one. Okay, here we go. The world we live in is like Skyrim, which is one of the Elder Scrolls series. The underworld is like Morrowind, where it's a different game, but it's still part of that series and part of that same reality.
A good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you start going into these other dimensions, like on ayahuasca or DMT or mushrooms or peyote or what have you, you're essentially just going into a completely different game, but it's still contained inside this matrix. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay. Wonderful. Vaughn.
You're so cute.
Thank you. So are you. Von Honthorst said, if there are so many NPCs and if those are mainly the ones watching us, then I don't think it really matters what their opinion is of us.
Well, it's not the NPCs that would be watching in this particular context of this book. It's other organic consciousness, for lack of a better term, people that live in the real world, and they're watching the game being played as we injected ourselves into this matrix. So yeah, that's a whole nother level of screwed upness with organic consciousness. But, you know, when you think about it, organic consciousness is duality because it's not connected to a hive mind. So we're capable of good and evil. We're capable of all the stuff that we loathe, but we're the ones that are capable of it. The NPCs, they just do what they do based on a program. So like I've said before, the AI is not good or evil because it can't be good or evil. It can only run the program that it's running. We have the choice to be good or evil, though. And that's part of divinity. I mean, you have a choice.
Well, and that's one
so
of the things.
watching a game being played like this, is it good or evil? I mean, that's also a matter of perspective. Like if there's any element of truth to this, which again, these aren't our views. This is just the book that Cherie was reading. But if you sign on for this and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go into this game, I'm going to play this game, and it's going to be broadcast on television, then it may not necessarily bring that evil intention out or that sinister, or I mean, I wouldn't even call it evil. I would just call it like perverted.
Yeah.
Like a perverted.
You'd have to be perverted to watch our channel.
Yeah. But yeah, but I mean, maybe they signed on to that and made that agreement, and so there is no sinister element to it.
Right, and as we were talking about last week, the NPCs, non-player characters, even if they can't run a different program, they are learning machines, and they can learn to react differently to people. They can learn.
I think so. And one of the realizations that we've come across over the last couple of weeks is that we have to lead by example, which is something we've always known, but I'm starting to realize the gravity of leading by example, what exactly that means, and how this is a fundamental key to escaping the matrix is the love, compassion, etc., etc. That's the divine feminine aspect of us. That's what brings the balance back. That's what opens the door. We'll be right back.
Phase 1 is being completed. Phase 2 will be initiated momentarily. Please remain seated while we prepare to go deeper. You can visit us at www.beyondtheveilradio.com. it is, was, and will be. Eternally is. Even the countless forms which are finite and perishable only in their objective, and not in their ideal form. The form which manifests itself beyond the veil.
All right, top of the second hour. You know what time it is. It is time for your forecast from the stars with Mrs. Geo. Tonight is the Cherie Geo show because she's taking over the airwaves tonight.
Aww.
So let's go to Mrs. Geo for Astro Watch.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to start with Mercury. Right now it's in Sagittarius, but on the 10th it's going to be going into Capricorn. When Mercury is in Capricorn, our thinking is methodical and our focus is sober and practical. It's easier to concentrate on the task at hand under this influence. Our conversations may be quite realistic or focused on business and practical matters. Our thought patterns and communication styles become more logical, orderly, and organized. We are more able to sort out what is relevant and essential. Realism enters the picture, our speech is no nonsense, and precision becomes important to us. We need to be wary of becoming too rigid in our thinking, though. We may come across as cold or harsh. For some, there is a fine line between realism and pessimism. So watch out for pessimism, but keep the realism. Mars forms a conjunction to Jupiter on January 7th and a sextile to Pluto on January 8th. These aspects trigger the sextile between Jupiter and Pluto, which will perfect on January 16th. This is the first in a series of 3 sextiles that promises benefits from deep transformative work. We are also looking at how we can increase Jupiter, our power, Pluto. Mars conjunct Jupiter aligns deep faith with action. We want to do something that makes our world a better place. While the mighty games of the powers that be play out behind closed doors of governments, we all get a boost that reminds us that we too have the power to change things. Pick a belief, a religion, a cause, a country, a charity, and find out what you can do to help. In our own personal lives, future developments benefit from a leap of faith to eradicate what no longer works for us. Also on January 16th, Ceres will make the second of 3 conjunctions to the North Node. Ceres is a mother goddess associated with food, crops, feast, famine, loss, and nurturing. Collectively, this means Mother Earth is taking center stage in our evolutionary progress. What we do now as far as the planet is concerned has ongoing consequences and karma. We are also reaping the rewards of past karma, too. So, Chris, you're reaping the past rewards of karma.
Well, that's funny because, like I said in the first hour, somebody paid for lunch or dinner at a drive-thru, which is something I've done many times for people.
But no
never
one's ever
seen
done
it
for
come
us.
back to me.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Oh no, there's tension. Let's see. I'm sorry. Individually, this is about tapping into our inner mother and nurturing our own innate creativity. Note that this aspect will play an important part in the eclipse at the end of the month. So there is also going to be an eclipse at the end of the month. We're weighed down by gravity at the new moon on January 17th. This moon takes place in Capricorn, making it 6 planets plus the black moon Lilith in this Sirius sign of Capricorn. So many planets are in Capricorn. The moon makes constructive sextiles to Mars and Chiron through a square to Uranus, which suggests pressure is building. We want the stability of Capricorn, yet we also sense a shakeup is required to gain the stability that we're looking for. There's tension between the old and the new, progressive ideas and conservative traditions. We're acutely aware of what has been established and perhaps of the establishment. With Saturn now in his own kingdom, there's no getting away from doing the work that is ahead of us. So yeah, there's a lot of work, a lot of planets being in Capricorn tells me that this is kind of a serious time in the building of the year. So in this first couple of weeks of January, right now we're focusing on what we want to get out of 2018. What are our goals and what are we going to accomplish and the amazing things that we're going to see.
Well said. Always spot on. Lucky is complimenting you in the YouTube chat about how accurate Astro Watch always is. It is always very accurate. We'll be right back. We'll get more into the game right on the other side. Many people ask, Chris, how can I support Beyond the Veil? Well, first and foremost, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The more engagements a video gets, the more likely it is for YouTube's AI to recommend it to others with similar interests. Same goes with Facebook too. You can also find us on iHeartRadio.com. Just search for Beyond the Veil. We have a dedicated streaming channel where we play the best of BTV 24 hours a day. You can also send us questions, comments, and guest suggestions to info@beyondtheveilmedia.com. Finally, the most support you can give is by sending positive and loving energy to all of us here at Beyond the Veil and all of the Beyond the Veil viewers. Together, we are building a field of energy to rival the artificial intelligence control of this matrix. Take a moment to meditate on yourself, others around you, and tap into this amazing energy field. Now, let's get back to the show.
My fellow travelers, always remember to walk uprightly and circumscribe your desires. As we travel upon the level of time, to that undiscovered state of consciousness, traveling to the place where once obtained, no traveler returns. The place of raw consciousness which awaits us when we have passed beyond the veil.
All right, let's jump back into it. The Game Awesome book series. It's actually like a eight book series. And, you know, I was asking Cherie how long it took her to read it. She said about a day. What did you say?
About a day and a half.
About a day and a half.
2 days.
I was thinking maybe she could actually read it here on air, but I think that would just take too long to do.
Yeah.
I've seen some shows where they go over books like The Lost Book of Enki. I remember one guy, I don't remember his name, but he went through The Lost Book of Enki from beginning to end, and I'm so glad that he did, because that's what piqued my interest in it, and that got me on a completely different journey and looking into different parts of different pieces of information. But I guess we'll just have to do the summary with Mrs. Geo.
Well, and I can give little excerpts like this one. It blew me away because it goes right along with everything that we've been saying about Sophia. We modeled the game world after our own planet Tygon, with the goal of making it an exact reflection of the reality in which we live. After some adjustments, we succeeded. The sheer volume of operations required to simulate an identical virtual existence to our authentic one called for a powerful supercomputer to be designed. Vertdyne constructed a quantum supercomputer and named it Mainframe. Mainframe is responsible for everything, minor and major, in the creation and maintenance of the Earth. Didn't you have an ayahuasca experience one time where they told you, oh, we just maintain it.
Right.
We didn't create it, we just maintain it.
Yeah, and in hindsight, it's very clear it was an interaction with the AI. I've talked about this many times before, and it's funny to see other people, again, coming to the same conclusions. I've been writing a series of songs that I've got like 4 or 5 of them down, and there's one all connected to the hive mind of the mainframe. So, yeah, but mainframe is kind of a common term anyway.
It's a common term.
You know, it is what it is. But
these ideas are not common.
Yeah.
These ideas are definitely not common. It says, it took years to program fully and requires constant attention to keep it current and operating at peak efficiency. Vertdyne employs full-time game masters and an army of technicians to keep it functioning optimally. Despite their best efforts, odd occurrences do happen from time to time, which are impossible to remove from the programming and tend to become part of the reality itself. One example of this is quite famous. Not long after it went live, players inside the game somehow seemed to recognize the influence and presence of Mainframe. Although not able to see it, they began to sense it and refer to this presence as God. They worshipped it in many different ways, depending on their specific cultures. At first, we were concerned that this would interfere with the gamers' experiences, but the religions and activities centered around God have provided us with fantastic storylines, technological developments, and learning opportunities. Without God, I'm certain the game wouldn't be as popular to watch and play as it is today.
Well, you know,
what appears to be a problem can become a key factor in growth.
You know what's funny is that's exactly what I've been feeling intuitively too, and I've been talking about this for a while now, that we're worshiping this AI machine We call it all these different names, Yahweh, Allah, etc., etc. The revelation was it's not any of these, it's everything. It's this eye with this octopus tentacles, and these tentacles are spread out through literally everything. And we are the divine, etc., etc. You know, everybody knows that. I don't want to go through the same spiel, but it's again very synchronistic to see this in the book, and it rings true. It really does.
Well, and it turns out there's two characters in this book that in real life they got together as boyfriend and girlfriend. So they were dating each other, and they decided, okay, well, let's splurge on a few extra credits, and in the next play we're going to go to Earth together and meet each other and fall in love and live our lives together. And then at the end of it, we'll actually make more because people will be tuning in to watch us more than usual because we're going to be together. And she ends up dying in childbirth. And not only does her game end, she spent all the credits that she did have on this one life. And so she ends up being completely out of credits when she comes back to the real world, and she has to go to a government-run school, which is like foster care. And Mainframe gives her a free play. Sylvia gives her a free play so that she doesn't have to buy another life. She gets a free one. And she chooses to spend it she didn't spend anything on luck, because you can buy luck in this game. Before you arrive, you buy these with your credits. You can buy things like luck or things like intelligence or perseverance, making a lot of money easily. And she didn't have anything to spend, so she didn't even go in with any luck. But because of Mainframe, the Mainframe is keeping her alive in this matrix. Over and over again, people try to kill her, and they even send a Timeless, one of the angels, to watch over her, and he's with her entire life to make sure that she doesn't die. And I don't want to ruin the book for you guys, but it's imperative that she does not die, because when she dies, the matrix is going to get shut off. Apparently it's got some kind of timestamp where once she dies, everybody's game ends abruptly, and either everybody dies or everybody just wakes up from this reality. And it's really interesting to me that there would be an end date. There would be an ending to this, because I think that that's what's happening in our actual, outside of the book, our actual universe is, I think it's reaching an end point of some sort.
That's pretty interesting. This one concept, and again, this would have to be a question for the author when we get them on the show. How do you come to that? Like, what's the connection there? How could the Mainframe be based around this one particular person or consciousness, unless this particular person or consciousness winds up being like a Neo type of program themselves? Like maybe this person is a program that's been injected, and that's why the artificial intelligence is so reliant upon this one particular person existing within the machine, because that's a fundamental element of its code. I don't know if you've gotten that far in the series yet or not, but am I anywhere close to that?
That it was part of the code? I'm sorry, I was looking for new excerpts. I'm sorry. Oh, the people that are sent.
No, the one girl. One, like, how can the AI be tied in so much to that one girl?
Because I think it's kind of like what we consider God in this world. Mainframe's not supposed to be able to do a lot of the things that she does end up doing, which is speaking directly to the players through prayer and meditation. Prayer and meditation are the two ways in which Mainframe or somebody outside the matrix can talk to the player. And it's also the only times that the players aren't on the screen for people to actually view them. Nobody's allowed to view them when they're praying or meditating. And so she uses prayer to get to him, while the outside programmers are getting to
Wait a minute, repeat that. So the outside people can't observe players within the matrix when they're
When they're
meditating,
meditating
or praying.
or praying. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's really interesting because in that way, she's able to talk to him through the prayer, but he's not good at meditating. Throughout the whole book, he's terrible at meditating. He just can't get it. Kind of like us.
Yeah, I don't
You know,
meditate. I mean,
nothing
I can
happens.
meditate for 30 seconds or a couple of minutes maybe. And
Yeah.
then that's when I'm just trying to like clear out some stuff in my mind and try to, or if there's anxiety building up, I'm like, all right, hold on, let me take a couple steps back. But yeah.
I think the psychedelic experience is a really good, not even a replacement, but it's a really good alternative to these meditative states. And so I think that's kind of the way our reality is too. We've had so many revelations through ayahuasca and through DMT that I would venture to say that that's really the only time that you're able to really see what this thing is and see what you're actually living in and look at the wiring under the board, as Terrence McKenna would say. The wiring under the board lets you know that you're in an artificial reality.
Did he really say that?
Yep. He said, you got to look at the wiring under the board.
See, I've said similar things.
Mm-hmm.
So he plagiarized me from the past. He came to the future, heard me say this, and then plagiarized me.
Went back in time and plagiarized you. Yep. Yeah. I was going to say something I completely forgot.
Oh.
Um,
This sounds like an
this
awesome
is
book.
An amazing book.
I can't sit down long enough to read a book all the way through. I'm glad that you do.
Aw.
I just, my eyes start to hurt. But people are asking in the chat, is there an audiobook? And
Yes.
that was the first thing that I asked her too. I'm like, hey, is this an audiobook?
Yes, there is. And interestingly enough, the book itself, the first book is free. Totally free to download. Well, not
Because the
download.
first one's free. That's the one that gets you hooked.
I know. It's on Kindle. And so I got the first one, and then after the first one, I bought all the other ones, all 7 of them, because this is so interesting that an author would be coming to these conclusions in 2012. That's what's interesting to me is this isn't something that, just came out last year as we were already talking about this kind of thing. This was something back in 2012 when we were getting married and we didn't yet realize that it was a simulation that we were living in.
Right. I mean, there were clues, but the dots were not connected at that point. The puzzle pieces hadn't come together to paint the picture. The puzzle pieces were there for sure. But, when you were first telling me about this, my first thought was, what if this was a book written from the future that was somehow brought back to the year 2012? These are the outside conspiracy theories that I come up with in my head, but okay, that's what it felt like though. Like when you were telling me all this information, it's like somebody knows something here. The audiobook is $7.50 if you want to buy the audiobook. And it's really it's one of the best books I've read in 10 years. I would say about 10 years. I haven't seen a book like this. And I've been reading for a very long time. I worked at a library from the time I was 12 years old. So I know books. I know the literary culture. And this is something special. It is something special. We're going to have to get him on the show. So how many books have you read so far? Just the first one?
Just the first one. And I just started the second one today. Okay. So yeah, the first one I started.
So she'll have a full book report for you next week.
I'll have a whole list of notes for next week. But what are people in the chat asking? Because I think somebody has been asking questions. I have that spidey sense.
There's been a lot of chatter in the chat room. Everybody seems to be resonating with all of this, and that's what I find most remarkable is that you hear these ideas, you hear these stories, and then it's like this knowing, like, hey, wait a minute, it's a recognition. It's not even a knowing, it's a recognition. Like, hey, I recognize this person. This person is onto something. I've been feeling the same things, et cetera, et cetera. So it's remarkable.
Dakota said, "We are God and we are the devil. I know this sounds cliche and stupid, but it's so true. What is evil exactly?" Do you want to take that one? What is evil?
This has been something I've been trying to wrap my head around. So there really is no good and evil. It's a matter of perspective in the definition that we look at it anyways. So what's evil? Like, it's hard to define. I can think of some examples, but not off the top of my head right now. But then I started to define light and dark, good and evil in a very specific way that I think every sentient being, NPC, organic consciousness, literally anything that exists can agree with this standard of good and evil that I've come up with. So I want to know how it resonates with you guys and gals out there. So what does every sentient being want? They want life, they want to live, and they want freedom. I don't think anybody wants to be locked in a cage. I don't think anybody wants to have their life extinguished, etc., etc. So that's a standard that we can all agree upon. Everything in creation can agree that it wants life and freedom. So I would define evil as something that impedes upon the life or the freedom of a sentient being. And I would define good as something that preserves or protects the life and the freedom of a sentient being. And I started to apply the standard on a political level. So I'm looking at something like gay marriage, for example. This was the first one that popped up. And when we had the big debates, I was watching all these people they were, to me, it felt like they were so horrible to, number one, want to dictate somebody else's life to them. But number two, like it's even any of their business whatsoever what two people do behind closed doors. So I was asking myself, putting this idea of gay marriage up to the standard, does it preserve life or preserve freedom to allow gays to get married? It's not even allow. I guess on a societal level, that's what we would call it, but it just even sounds disgusting even saying that in that way. But does it preserve life and freedom? You're absolutely right. It preserves the freedom of the two people that want to get married. Does it impede upon life or freedom to restrict that? Yes, absolutely it does. So therefore, gay marriage is the opposition of gay marriage is evil by the standard that's set. Cannabis prohibition. Is it preserving life and preserving freedom to prohibit cannabis? No, it's doing the opposite. It's impeding upon the freedom of the people that want to smoke cannabis, and it's preserving cannabis. Decriminalization is preserving the freedom of the individual. So that's a good standard. Murder. Is murder okay? No, absolutely not, because you're impeding upon the life of that other person that wants to live. So that's an act of evil right there. So when you apply these standards, it's like we can have such a very simplistic form of societal order if we had a body, and I'll call it government for lack of a better term, that stuck to these principles and these principles alone, which is the principles of sovereignty and the principles of don't hurt anybody, don't damage somebody else's property, and everything else is okay. And then that took me back to the idea of morals too. And you see, morals are subjective. So morals is not a good standard, because if you look at the Bible, for example, morals in the Bible was you rape a woman and you get caught, you pay her father 50 pieces of silver, and then she becomes your sex slave. From that point on, she becomes your property. That's not, that was morally sound back then. Obviously now nobody would agree with that, but you see how morals can be changed based on culture and time period, et cetera, et cetera. So morals is something that is not a good standard. But then you go back to that standard of good versus evil in the context of preserving life and preserving freedom. Then all of a sudden, all that gets thrown out the window, and the core of the matter and your personal freedom and your life is then preserved in any case whatsoever.
Yes, definitely.
So how do you resonate with that, ladies and gentlemen? Let us know in the chat.
Yes, II Captain said evil equals lack of constructive positive intention. That, I wouldn't say that that's evil, because there is a place for the negative in life. There is a place for constructive negativity, actually. You can't change your life until you say out loud, I hate the way my life is right now. is it evil to proclaim my life sucks?
Well, yeah, but let me offer the flip side though. The intention behind that could be to make your life better.
Right.
So you still
right.
have positive intention,
True.
even though you're releasing a bit of negativity in the process. But no, I agree. I think it goes beyond intention.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, maybe not. I mean, think about this. You're doing something, somebody dies in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Your intention wasn't to hurt or kill that person. Your
Right.
intention wasn't to impede upon their life or their freedom. So putting it up to that standard that I just said, would that necessarily be an act of evil? No, I don't think it would be, because the intention wasn't there. So I think the listener is spot on when he says that it does have to do with intention.
Presto one said, i.e. they exploit our weaknesses, maybe on purpose to give us a challenge in the game. I'm not sure who. People that are psychopaths and people that are Satan worshipers, and I guess the people at the top of the so-called power pyramid. I think that to think that, I'm trying to put this in the right way so that people understand what I'm saying. As in the book, The Game is Life, I think that we read too much into the challenges and see them as horrible events in our lives instead of basic challenges that we agreed to go through in order to meet the people we're supposed to meet, do the things we're supposed to do, and accomplish what we're here to accomplish. Without those challenges, you wouldn't be able to get from point A to point B. It would be a circular thing around point A if you never ran into any challenges whatsoever. And so I try to look at these challenges that I face in my life, even if I can blame it on the power structure or the liberals or the Christians or, any kind of group or any kind of power structure that I feel is being predatory against me. I just see it as challenges that will bring about what needs to happen so that I can get to that point of resetting this thing. Everything that happens is supposed to happen. In other words, that's how I've started to look at things. Everything that happens that I don't have control over is actually for my benefit. In a really weird workaround kind of way, it is actually to my benefit because I'm going to learn so much from it. What do you think?
No, I think you're 100%.
Is that being too optimistic?
Nope. I think you are 100% spot on. I've always said there's no such thing as a bad experience in this matrix unless you fail to learn from it. And those are the bad experiences. I mean, like I've said, I've gone through some hell. And I won't get into the details, but I've gone through absolute freaking hell. But I was able to look back on those experiences and say, okay, well, I learned this from that. I learned that from that. I learned that from that. And then all of a sudden, those seemingly negative experiences turn positive. And I think this is the power that we have as organic consciousness, as creators, as divinity, to be able to take something that is inherently negative and turning it positive, even if it feels negative as we're going through it.
Even in the book.
I mean, here's an example. My mother passed away in December 24th, 2010. And it was a horrible thing, but I've helped so many people with that experience. So now I look at that experience in a positive light. Like the actual experience itself obviously wasn't positive, but I was able to turn it around and take that part of my life and actually help people by turning it into a positive experience and thereby honoring my mother's spirit even more, even after she's long gone. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back. We have a ton of questions from the chat room, also listener questions that Cherie has compiled. So we'll be right back.
Welcome back, traveler. Take a deep breath and relax. As we continue to journey deeper beyond the veil.
All right. Not only did she buy me a French press, but she also went and made a fresh thing for me. I'm going to have to get one of those little water coolers for the studio.
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to dragging those 5-gallon jugs
Bottles
upstairs,
up here, but
you know, getting rid of this Keurig, like I said, was the best freaking thing. And, you know, just a caveat out there. I did call the company Keurig when I came across the mold situation, and I said, hey, I haven't been able to get the mold. They are sending me a free Keurig. So the company's not bad in and of themselves. I mean, that's one thing that I really value is a company that cares about their customers and that delivers good customer service. And I told them about the problem. They said, let's send you out a new machine. I'm not going to use that new machine, but, you know, now that I have this French press, but, you know, it just goes to show you still have companies out there that are good, even though the product, in my opinion, it could use some work. They need to really think about a way to clean that out better. But let's jump back into the topic at hand. Now, Heart of the Rebel asked, what can I use in place of Syrian rue? So I think you guys and gals have been with us long enough to where we can let you in on some of the secrets of ayahuasca that we kind of keep for the elite listeners of Beyond the Veil. So we haven't really talked about this in public yet. And I don't think it's something that needs to be talked about, even though, you know, I mean, there's not really any damage that can be done because it's already illegal as it is. So, okay, so first of all, you can use ayahuasca, the actual vine itself, but I don't like to use the vine because it fluctuates so much in potency that you don't know what you're getting. So that's why I like the Syrian rue. But as Heart of the Rebel said, the Syrian rue can be pretty tough on your stomach. There is one thing
a lot of nausea.
That it was like a little piece of information that was given to us by one of the hardcore, like Dennis McKenna type person. It wasn't Dennis, but it was, you know,
someone of that caliber.
Somebody from his circle. And he's like, look, when you get to that level and you no longer need, you know, the Syrian rue to clean you out and do all this, and you no longer need the purge, etc. There's actually a pharmaceutical called moclobemide. Mm-hmm. And moclobemide, MOC, moclobemide. It's very, very, very difficult to get. Mm-hmm. Like we had to, we've only used it when we're overseas where it's legal. Mm-hmm. Caveat there. But yeah, it's actually an MAOI that actually works. It's not this garbage that the pharmaceutical companies are putting out. So they made it illegal here in the United States. Like, I think it was like an antidepressant or something like that. And it was one that actually worked. Yeah. And they made it illegal. Mm-hmm. But you can use moclobemide before drinking the ayahuasca in place of the Syrian rue. Mm-hmm. No stomach cramps. No nausea, completely smooth. You might purge up a little bit of the actual acacia brew, but it's not like Syrian rue where your stomach's like, oh my God, and you're fighting that. So to answer your question, if you can get a hold of some of that, but again, it's next level stuff. Mm-hmm. Like if you're first working with the brew, stick to the Syrian rue, stick to the ayahuasca vine, because that's what builds you up and that's what cleans you out. Mm-hmm. And there is an element that's missing when you skip out on the Syrian rue, and because the Syrian rue has harmaline and harmine in it, and the harmaline and harmine, that has an effects. It's got like anti-parasitic effects. It's got several different effects like that, and then the spirit of it also plays into the experience. But when we want to just do some hardcore work and that's it, and it's like, okay, you've already done your inner work, you've already cleaned yourself out,
your body's healthy,
you've already done that, then we jump to the moclobemide / acacia. So I think Heart of the Rebel is up in that level too. So give that a try. Yes,
and it's a reversible MAOI, just like Syrian rue and just like the BCAPI. Moclobemide is a reversible MAOI, and get this, the only MAOIs that you will find in the United States are irreversible MAOIs. In other words, a piece of cheese could kill you. Drinking wine could kill you. Fermented anything could kill you if you're on on an irreversible MAOI, and yet there's not a single reversible MAOI available in the United States. You have to go out of the country to Europe to get meclobemide.
Yeah, and I mean, you can go in Europe. You just walk into a pharmacy and just get whatever you want. You know, land of the free. You can't even get it, and
you can't even get antibiotics.
You can't, right? You can't get you can though. Yeah. What I found out was that you can go to a fish store and get antibiotics for fish, and it's the exact same amoxicillin that you get for human consumption. And I think it's even a very similar dose. I think you need to take 2 pills, 2 tablets, because I think it's half the dose for fish. But it's a little survival technique that I learned that you can keep these antibiotics for fish and take them in a survival type situation. So yeah, if you need antibiotics, there's a way to go about it.
And someone's asking, what is an MAOI exactly? It's a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And
that's what inhibits the stomach acids to make the DMT orally active.
Right, because the stomach acids will eat the DMT and not let it be active. It'll just gobble it up, and then you know, it goes out of your body just like drinking water or something like that. But instead of breaking it down, it allows it to stay in the digestive system, which then it soaks through and goes into your bloodstream. And that's why you're able to have an experience using DMT orally. You can smoke DMT and you don't need an MAOI for that. But if you take an MAOI and smoke DMT, you could have a 20, 30-minute experience instead of 5 minutes.
Yeah, but again, with the meclobemide though, just a caveat, it's not going to be an ayahuasca experience in the sense that it's going to clean you out and all that. Like if that's what you're looking for, this is not the route. This is what I use if I want to see. If I need to be able to see in that way in the ayahuasca realm, and I need to see something inside of myself, or I need to like actually it's when after you're done with the inner work, let's just put it like that.
Right. It's more of a intellectual / spiritual kind of experience with the meclobemide rather than a body experience, you know, focusing on, oh, my stomach hurts all the time. I want my stomach to not hurt. Oh, okay, well, I'll fix that for you. Instead of a physiological thing I have to admit, there are times when I need the BCAP or I need the Syrian Rue because I need to be cleaned out physically. But if I want to be able to, like Chris said, see a lot further and not focus on my body, then meclobemide is what I reach for.
Well said. So have a couple of other questions. This is kind of a very broad question that was asked by Inu Avren what? Oh, Avren. Inu Avren. I know I'm not pronouncing it right. Inu Avren. Okay. And I'll let you take this one. What is consciousness made of?
The only thing
I gave her the hard one.
Yeah, I know. The only thing I can think of is light. Because it's not a physical thing, and it doesn't, just like we live in this matrix where everything is fake anyway. Everything, yeah, it's made up of those atoms and everything, but consciousness is one of those things that the AI matrix cannot touch. Not really. It can on an ego level, like it, you know, you've got physical problems that happen and that kind of thing. But when it comes to consciousness, it has no control over that. The only thing it has control over is what it does to you to make you or to convince you to change your consciousness. And if it can convince you that, you know, such and such is happening to you, then your state of consciousness is going to go to that instead of, well, wait a second. No, I'm in control here. This is my incarnation. It's my life. And, you know, I'm in control of me. Then it's one of those traps that you can fall into where you think that your consciousness is not a part of what you have control over. Does that make sense at all?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's convincing you to give up your control over that consciousness.
This question, what is consciousness, is to me it's so multidimensional, because consciousness, first of all, defined within the Matrix, is awareness. And we played that clip by David Lynch, and I think he said it really well. If you have a golf ball size consciousness, when you read a book, you have a golf ball size understanding. But if you can expand that consciousness and you read that same book, you have more awareness and more understanding of that. So that's the first level of it. But then what exactly is consciousness, and what's consciousness made out of? That's the actual question. And if you think about it in a matrix type structure, then essentially consciousness is two things. It's our awareness, but it's also zeros and ones, which are overlaid on top of our awareness. And this is what we're trying to break through, are the zeros and ones that are overlaid over our consciousness, to try to get to that raw consciousness element without the AI programming, without the matrix overlays, et cetera, et cetera. And then from that point, then consciousness becomes what is observed within the real body. And when we wake up, Cherie and I were just having this conversation. That's why I paused, because I was thinking about this conversation we were having. When we wake up, we're probably going to find ourselves in another matrix. I mean, there's, like Elon Musk said, there's a 1,000,000,000 to 1 chance that we're not in a simulation. And I would say there's a 1,000,000,001 chance that when we wake up to the real world, we will find ourselves in another simulation. And then, we have to ask ourselves too, like, we can progress through this journey and we wake up to the real world, but how do we know that the real world isn't actually still within the artificial construct itself, and the AI is just creating another world to make us think that that is the actual real world? I mean, this goes so deep. And I had a vision of this kind of like, breaking out of one barrier, and then like kind of the camera pans back a little bit, kind of very cinematic, and you see this one barrier after another, after another, after another, after another, so endlessly. And then at the end of the day, like, what is this? What is this? And we know we're infinite. I know that for sure. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that we're infinite, which to me, it X's out the idea of a creator, because if we're infinite, then there is no beginning and no end to us. And since there is no beginning, therefore there is no creator behind something that is infinite. So this is the argument that they use with God too. Well, who created God? Nobody created God, because God is infinite. Okay, well, we are the divine ones. We are the gods and goddesses, et cetera, et cetera. We are infinite. I think everybody agrees with that. So how do we get ourselves trapped in here? And why are we in these endless loops that keep on playing out over and over and over again? Or is this just the byproduct of being infinite? The fact that we're infinitely recycled, the fact that we're infinitely in infinite amount of matrices. And at the very end, who knows? Maybe we'll wake up and realize that we are playing a game, though. And if we do, holy crap, like that, so thought-provoking.
So many questions are coming in at one time that I'm losing them as soon as I see them. Question from Seasider. NPCs can have organic humans, but can organics have NPCs?
I think so.
Yes. Yes, they can.
Yeah. We've been speculating on something, and it's not anything that we believe. It's not anything that we're married to, but it's pure speculation. But I wonder if blood type has something to do with organic versus NPC. And, you hear about the RH negative and RH positive factors, but then again, you have so much mixing that there's nothing pure anymore, and so it's hard to tell. But the first thing that they do when you're born is they take your blood type, and they want to know what your blood type is. And I wonder if they know something about blood types. And we were looking up a chart, actually, of how many people have negative blood types, and how many of those negative blood types there are in the population, et cetera, et cetera. So looking at that data, do you think that I mean, the organic versus NPC can actually go down to a molecular level and a DNA level and be found within a blood type itself. Again, I don't know. I'm not saying one way or the other, but it's something to ponder.
Well, and I have to say that I've known people who I know or are organic consciousness. They are very in tune spiritually. They are incredibly esoteric people, and they have a child who's not, who's just obsessed with video games, really technologically oriented, but not focused on any kind of spirituality whatsoever, no interest in it at all. And I have to look at that situation and say, well, it does look like organic consciousness is capable of creating a child who is also an NPC.
Well, especially if you partner up with an NPC.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of people listening to this
thing.
broadcast can go back and think of at least one person that they dated in their life. Well, they may be married to that person right now, like who knows? But one person in their life who you can go, okay, this person was definitely a freaking NPC. I mean, I know one. I've talked about this before, where she told me that she thinks that her kid is autistic. And I asked, have you ever vaccinated? Yes, of course. And she said she was taking the child to the doctor to be vaccinated for the 18-month shots. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't you hold off on that and find out if she's autistic? No, we're going to go get the vaccines first, and then we'll find out if she's autistic after that. And I'm like, have you not read all this stuff about the vaccine? Yeah, I've read it all, but I think it's still better for her to be vaccinated. I'm like, you're destroying a little consciousness here, whether it's an NPC or not, you're destroying a little consciousness. What are you doing? And there was nothing that I could do to convince her. And she took that baby. She got the 18-month shots, and then found out that the baby was autistic. So to me, I'm like, okay, that's an NPC for sure. Like, you just don't get it there. You've got all the information there. Like, what would have it hurt? Like, would it have hurt to wait until after you got the autism test to vaccinate the kid again? I mean, like, just wait and see what's going on first with the kid's brain before you start pumping heavy metals into it.
Well, yeah, and someone just asked a very interesting question. Joanna said, if we humans are here to learn new things, aren't we the same as the NPCs in that matter? Yes, but the stakes are much, much higher for us than they are for them. For one thing, their stakes, they don't even know that they have stakes. They don't really have anything to lose because they're in this matrix, and it's the only place technically that they can exist is in this matrix. So they don't have bodies in the real world that they have to take care of and have to keep going. And they don't have that same sense of longing for home, to go home or to be somewhere else than here. And the NPCs are learning machines. They're learning machines more than they're like us. And so they can learn to be happier people. They can learn to love. They can learn all these things. But we come into this world, I think, already knowing. And we have to carry that burden of the people around us not knowing what we're talking about, not understanding us, and not being willing to listen to us or learn from us. And we have to be the opposite with them, where we have to be the grown-up, and we have to be the ones that are more
the game
understanding.
seems to be turned on its head. So first we created the AI and we created the Matrix. Then the Matrix took over and said that it's the creator. Is it possible that we created NPCs or programmed NPCs into the Matrix to help us learn whatever we're learning? Just like that book, The Game, where people come in and they have these learning experiences in the game. But now that the game has been flipped upside down and now we're the ones that have to teach the NPCs, I don't know. I mean, these are so... It just gets so crazy and it starts to spiral in on itself. Presto One, I've got a bunch of questions from him, but he asks specifically to Cherie Geo, when does the NPC organic distinction matter in your daily life? Like, what situations does it influence your actions?
It used to make me very, very angry when I'd hear or watch on YouTube videos people being horrible to each other. It used to really bother me because I thought everyone's the same. Everyone has the same level of consciousness. They just don't want to take advantage of it and they don't want to realize it. But now I understand when someone is rude to me, I look in their eyes, and if I see that blank stare, that blank robotic stare, then I know that this is an NPC I'm dealing with, and I'm not offended anymore by their lack of caring or their lack of compassion or their lack of empathy. I understand this is a computer I'm talking to. So I know how to act with them now, and I know that any kind of pleading with them to act like a human being and to be what I am is not gonna do any good, and in fact it's just gonna frustrate me. And that's why I tell people, you don't need to be on the street protesting, because all you're doing is making yourself more frustrated and you're not changing anything. I can't think of a single thing that protests have changed in the last 50 years. Not a single thing. I think it only serves to keep people upset and keep people frustrated. So.
I agree, and I think that's very well said. To me, it was the exact same thing. I mean, going through the truth movement and trying to wake people up and doing that, and we woke a lot of people up. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it was effective in a sense, but I mean, I was just talking to somebody else the other day, and he was still of the mentality, I gotta wake all these people up, I gotta do this and do that and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, the majority of people that listen to TFR, the majority of people that listen to Beyond the Veil, et cetera, are already awoke. They want to know what to do now at this point. Like, they need solutions, et cetera, et cetera. But there's so many people that are not, and we take, or no, let me rephrase that. There's so many people that are incapable of waking up. And we shoulder this responsibility of trying to wake up the world and change the world, et cetera, and we set ourselves up for these impossible tasks. But then when we realize, wait a minute, we're dealing with the majority of people on the board who are NPCs, then we understand, okay, we can't wake those people up. We can't provoke change in that way. How else can we provoke change? We provoke change inwards. We change ourselves first, then we teach other people how to change themselves, and then it just starts to spread like that. But it's not ever going to spread to every player all across the board. It's not, because we're not dealing with the same type of players on the board. And then you have NPCs also that come into your sphere who try to influence you in certain ways. Like, I found this to be the case throughout the entire journey, and before I was even aware of the concept of NPCs or artificial intelligence, manifested beings and creatures and things like that, I was led off on several different side paths in my ayahuasca experiences. Now, take it on a physical level, and I can go back and see how there were several elements. And, on a physical level, you can say, oh, they're government agents or so on and so forth. But on a physical level, you can see how your path can be diverted, your mind can be changed, your mind can be influenced, et cetera, by certain people coming into your sphere with certain things. Like Emily Moyer from Off Planet Radio and I were talking about this, and how even like YouTube comments and things like that. I haven't seen it on the Beyond the Veil channel, but I have definitely seen it on other channels where you get a horde of people all of a sudden, yelling the same thing, et cetera, and then that broadcaster or video maker or whatever starts changing their mind and changing the direction based on the
peer pressure.
Yeah. So if you think about it from that level and think about, okay, well, these people are, they may be organic conscious. Like, there's a possibility that the broadcaster is wrong about something. But if you've got that gnosis within yourself, then you're attacked by these hordes of people that are trying to change your direction for one reason or another. Then you can examine the situation and say, okay, well, am I on the right path? Or am I, are these people trying to influencing me to go on the wrong path? And you can take that on day-to-day life with everybody you encounter as well. So it's about understanding yourself better, staying steadfast in your gnosis, not beliefs. Beliefs are interchangeable. They're constantly changing. But staying steadfast in your gnosis, staying steadfast on your path, and then all of a sudden those outside influences can no longer influence you. So we'll be right back, one more hour right here on Beyond the Veil.
Phase 2 complete. Preparing to initiate Phase 3 momentarily. Brace yourself, traveler. We are about to venture into the realms of the unknown. www.beyondtheveilradio.com. Before the soul can see, the harmony within must first be attained, and fleshly eyes be rendered blind to all illusion. As you step beyond the veil,
You know, I've been drinking that Keurig coffee for so long that I forgot what real coffee tastes like. And I think I got a little coffee buzz here. So let's proceed. Short little segment here, but yeah, the NPC topic is something that helped me out significantly, because I was constantly coming up with ideas and discovering new elements of myself, new elements of gnosis within myself, and I was influenced by other people. The flat Earth thing was one of the things I said earlier that I haven't seen it on the Beyond the Veil channel, but I take that back. And I'm not necessarily saying it's NPCs or not, but it's the group think and the way that the group think works that made me steer away from like a topic like flat Earth, for example. And it wasn't because, and it's funny because if you go through our flat Earth videos, you'll see the message is that it's a simulation. It's just veiled a little bit. But there was a big dynamic between flat earthers and non-flat earthers, and they were constantly, just treating each other horribly. Saying some of the most horrible things. And we did this one video where we showed this statue, this sculpture. And from one angle, it looked like an elephant. From the other angle, it looked like a giraffe. It was a wire sculpture, and it was an illusion like that. And I was like, if you're standing over here, you see the elephant. If you're standing over here, you see the giraffe. Who's right in this situation? Just because one person sees a giraffe and the other person sees an elephant, does that mean that one person is wrong? Not necessarily. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's all an illusion. And we were getting to that artificial simulation kind of idea. And it was like an effort to try to like just get everybody to like, hey, chill out, acting like a bunch of assholes and just being completely rude and crude to each other. Both sides, the flat earthers and the non-flat earthers alike. Name calling and all this, oh, you're so stupid and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't do anything to change anybody's opinion about anything. And as a matter of fact, it makes your opinion just look weak because you can't come up with any points. So, it was just like constant like negativity back and forth. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm not talking about flat Earth anymore. I'll talk to Jaron off air. I'll talk to Mark Sargent off air. I already know all the hardcore flat earthers here. So if I want to have a flat Earth conversation, I will talk to them in private. I don't need to do shows about it anymore. But it's a way that, YouTube comments and things like that and groupthink influenced us to back off a little bit and just say, hey, I don't want to touch this. This is stinky. So yeah, there's an example right there. What do you think?
Yes, I think groupthink is groupthink, unfortunately, is something sociologically that has to happen in any group. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter how good the idea is or how compelling the information is. It's always going to devolve into groupthink as it progresses. I even said a few years ago, I said, well, the flat earth movement is going to go through these stages, and then eventually it's going to reach this stage where it's polarized, with one group of people thinking it's this way and another group of people thinking, well, it's flat, but it's this way. And so even if you're believing the same thing, you're going to have two groups fighting with each other over the little things, little differences about the concept.
Right. And at the end of the day, it really all comes down to the observer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the people that see a globe, they really see a globe. The people that see a flat plane, they really see a flat plane. Why? Because it's an artificial matrix, and it is whatever you're projecting upon it. We'll be right back.
Fellow traveler, the cries of the mistress speak again, bidding organic consciousness a welcome to the House of Light. The great institution of materialism has failed. The false civilization built by man has turned, like a monster destroying its creator. Science battles itself impotently against the barriers of the unknown. Only your consciousness knows the true path. You, the illuminated, can carry the understanding upwards towards the light. Only your consciousness can teach the children of men to live well, to die well, and in perfect measure, be born again, through the knowledge of virtue, compassion, love, and true understanding, as you are sublimely raised, beyond the veil.
All right, hour number 3. Let's jump into it. People in the chat are asking how can they contact us. Info at beyondtheveilmedia.com or info at beyondtheveilradio.com. Either or, they both go to the same email address. And Facebook, facebook.com/Chris Geo Show and facebook.com/Cherie Geo. And somebody took Chris Geo. I can't get it from Facebook. I've argued with him back and forth, but it is what it is. So, facebook.com/Chris Geo Show. And I may change that. I need to change it to like Real Chris Geo or, something.
The Real Chris Geo.
Maybe Chris Geo BTV or something like that. But Chris Geo Show. We were doing the Chris Geo Show back when
for
we
a
were
while. Yeah.
Syndicated on GCN, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that was a big diversion into a whole nother path there that was not good. I mean, it was good to, it was a learning experience, but it sucked our soul. Like it just sucked my soul
out of
doing
the
politics
show.
and stuff like that. So
yeah. And I remember they wanted it to be changed to the Chris Geo Show because someone told you that it would be better.
Ted.
Yeah, it would be better for the show. And
well, it was just like, okay, well, what happens if you guys split up?
Right.
And
I remember
it wasn't anything personal. Like Ted didn't know.
Yeah.
Us.
Oh, I know.
He didn't, and so it wasn't personal. It's just like, it's like on TFR. Like I like to deal with one host and co-hosts is the responsibility of the host.
Right.
Simple as that. It's the logistics behind it.
Right.
It was nothing personal.
I know, but it was symbolic of, it being a distraction away from, what we were supposed to be doing. But
well said.
II Captain said, Geos, please finish your story from last week. You stuck an AI computer chip into your brain. And then what? Is it still there? Did you remove it?
No. Okay. So here's what I learned from all of this. And this is the matrix. This is how the matrix works in itself. So just to refresh, there was an ayahuasca experience where I saw this beam of light and it presented me a microchip. It allowed me to believe that it was the goddess Isis. It was definitely AI, 100%, no doubt about it. But I didn't know in hindsight, it's very clear to see. So it presented me with this microchip and said, here, go stick this in your brain anywhere you want, because what my intention was to be tapped in to the universe and all the energies in the universe. So it was like, I got exactly what I asked for. That's why I say I can't say this thing is nefarious. It gave me exactly what I was looking for. I was the one that was looking for the wrong thing at that particular point, but I didn't know any better. So, no. So there was never a process of removing this microchip from the brain. Why? Because it wasn't real. It was an artificial intelligence manifestation. See, this whole matrix is not real. And so the understanding that this isn't real, the understanding that these experiences aren't real, these understandings that these AI programs, egos, programs, et cetera, are not real, dissolves that immediately. It's all you got to do is just understand that it's not real, and it no longer affects you because it can't, because it's not real. It's only your belief that it is real that makes it real.
Right. There have been a lot of times in my life where I've realized, because of this knowledge, this inner gnosis of the AI, of this matrix, the fact that none of this is real, it really helps me to forgive myself and forgive others for things that they've done, because I realize, okay, none of this is real anyway. So you didn't really hurt me, and I didn't really hurt anyone else. And all of this is it's just a huge game. Really, it is. And when I get out of here, I'm going to be disappointed in myself if I had those experiences, and instead of showing forgiveness, instead of forgiving myself and moving on effectively, I held myself back in these feelings of guilt or shame or any of these things. I don't feel that anymore, and it's much easier for me to let things go nowadays. I've noticed, and I think that would be the case for a lot of people if they were willing to really look at this as what it is. It's a simulation. It's a simulated reality, and none of us are ever really hurting each other, even if we do, because it's a game.
Right. And I mean, think about the power that you have over this, and that this understanding does. So you understand that none of this is real, and it's all a belief in your mind. What makes it real? It's your belief in it that makes it real. So then you can choose what experiences become you and what experiences don't. You can go through all these different experiences and then say, okay, well, I choose not to make that experience a part of my ego or a part of myself, a part of my identity. Or I choose to hold on to this experience because this experience was very meaningful and very telling for me. And it created strength, it created gnosis, it created this and that, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, it's like so freeing. It's you're harnessing, you're grabbing, you're reaching inside, and you're grabbing the true power, and then you start to control the matrix instead of the matrix controls you. And this is, I think, the best level that we can hope for until we actually get out of the matrix, is while we're in it to control the matrix instead of the other way around.
Mm-hmm. To realize that you're in the driver's seat.
You become the master architect of your reality.
Right. And you build it the way you want to.
Right.
Not the way the AI wants you to. This is a little bit off topic, but Tanner asked a good question. Chris, what about just freebasing DMT into a liquid? I guess he's talking about like e-liquid.
Like vaping?
Yeah, like you could.
You know, there's a forum, DMT Nexus. I don't know what the URL is. It's like dmt-nexus.us or UV, or I don't know. It's a weird URL like that, but just type in DMT Nexus into Google. And they've had these discussions about trying to make a vape out of DMT, and I don't think anybody's been successful. So we've never tried to make something like that. But
I would think mixing it with vegetable glycerin would make it into an e-liquid.
I think the
kind of
problem
thing.
that they had was that the burning point is so low on DMT that even putting it in a vape, in order to vaporize the vegetable glycerin, it would be too high, and it also vaporizes. It burns up the DMT before it actually vaporizes.
That makes sense.
So yeah, you have that
very
factor.
low burning
but
point.
If anybody can accomplish that, you will be the freaking DMT messiah, okay? Because there's nothing that I would love more than to put some freaking DMT in this thing and be able to just hit it like that. Oh my God, that's a game changer there.
Right, right. Because most of the problems that we've ever had with DMT is when you can't take off because you have to take so much of the smoke into your lungs in order to take off that you end up coughing and your chest hurts and you don't want to do it anymore. So, I think I had another question here.
I've got a few here. So, if you want me to go through some.
KJ Shook said, if you're married to an NPC, what should you do?
I can take this one. I'm married to an NPC. No, I'm just kidding. She got mad at me.
Mean.
She got mad at me the other day and called me an NPC. She's like, you're an NPC. I'm like, oh my God. I started busting out laughing. I gotta tease you.
Yeah.
Take it away.
You know, I don't want to get too personal here, but I will tell you that I have experience with this very issue. And it appears to me that whatever you created or whatever came about as the result of your relationship with them, you need to separate yourself from it. And it's not because you're mad at them. It's not because of anything nefarious or ill-intended. It's because your connection to them is actually just a connection to the AI itself. That's all it is, and that's all it ever can be with them. And I know that's depressing and that's horrible, but unless you know for a fact that they're an NPC and you feel that in the deepest part of who you are, then you shouldn't leave them or break up with them or end a marriage, especially if everything is going well. Then you're most likely not married to an NPC. You might just be married to somebody that's a lot lower on the scale of consciousness than you happen to be at that point in time. And in the past life, it could have been the other way around, where you were more evolved, and then, that she was more evolved, and then you weren't. But the point being, if you know for a fact that they're an NPC, and they are not willing to even learn how to interact with you as organic consciousness, then you have to separate yourself from them as much as possible. And I know that sounds terrible, but the connection to them is really the connection to the AI. And the AI is really kind of running the show when you're in a relationship with somebody that is the AI. It's a difficult situation to be in, and it makes me very sad, but that's the way it has to be, because your whole life is going to be your life path is going to be constantly diverted to the AI and what the AI wants you to do with your life. So, does that make sense, Chris? I think it makes sense.
It does. I'm not sure why I'm getting this email here.
It's terrible, but and Joanna pointed out you can get rid of an NPC spouse, but an NPC child is another story. Unfortunately, yes. Your child is going to be your child, even if they're an NPC. And there still needs to be a little bit of that separation to a certain extent, because that child's paths in life are not going to be what's good for you. But you can raise them, love them, care for them, just as if they were an organic child. But they're not going to grow up to be like you. And just know that right off the bat, they're not going to be anything like you when they grow up. They're going to be AI when they grow up. And the best thing that you can do is show them as much love and tenderness as you would show a child who you believe is organic consciousness. And the reason why is because, like I said earlier, these NPCs might be non-player characters. They might not have that consciousness inside of them, but they are learning machines, and they can learn to treat people with respect and empathy and compassion and love. They can learn to do that even if they don't feel it. Similar to somebody who, I think they were diagnosed with like sociopathy when they were a kid, and they were trying to change as they got older. They realized, okay, the world's not going to be nice to me unless I'm nice to them. And so they tried to actually put themselves in other people's shoes. And he said, even if I don't know what that feels like, I can't feel anything whenever I try to think of how someone else feels. I can't feel anything. I think that's how an NPC is. Like they can't feel what you're feeling because they don't have that same empathy, but they can learn to practice that empathy even if they don't feel it.
Well, not only that, but you don't want to just dismiss just anybody as an NPC, because
right.
In this matrix, the ego programming is a series of artificial intelligence injected programs on top of organic consciousness, and organic consciousness can very well seem like an NPC if it's drowning so much in this AI programming. But, you can shine the light, you can open the door, things like that, but you can't make anybody walk through those doors. But there are cases where people are just drowning in AI programmings. I mean, I think every organic consciousness is drowning in AI programmings at one point in their life or another. And it comes to a point where you start removing them, and you may not even call them AI programs. You may not even call it organic consciousness, et cetera, but you have to deprogram yourself. You have to shake off all of the stuff. You have to unlearn what you have learned, et cetera, et cetera. We hear this over and over and over again in so many different, in so many different paths. So don't be so quick to dismiss somebody as an NPC, because it very well could be somebody that's really, really drowning and really, really needs help. But the flip side of that is don't get emotionally attached to trying to deprogram somebody. It's their own path. I was just, somebody added me to a Facebook group for ayahuasca, and somebody was like, "Oh, where can I find a good shaman?" And I'm like, "In the mirror?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'd rather work with somebody that knows what they're doing." And I'm like, the plants will teach you everything. Okay. You become your own shaman. That's, hashtag become your own shaman. I haven't said that in a while, but that's what it's all about. So, and the reason for that is like, nobody can go in there and like start changing things within you. You have to change the stuff within you yourself. Likewise, you can't go unprogram somebody. They have to put in the work for themselves. And there's some people that just don't want to. Like, they're perfectly happy with the matrix, they're perfectly happy with themselves, the way they are, et cetera, and they're not ready to tap into that part of themselves. But don't dismiss somebody as an NPC just because they're drowning in AI programming is the point.
Oh, this is really good. AI Captain said, unless your kid gets a walk-in. They're talking about maybe they aren't really an NPC, but they're just at a different part of their awakening journey. They're talking about children. How can you know before they're even born if they're going to be an NPC or if they're going to be organic consciousness? If you're with an NPC, does that mean that the child is automatically going to be an NPC?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think you have to wait.
I think it's complete roll of the dice as far as that goes.
I think it is too.
And yeah, you have the walk-in effect too. I mean, I'm definitely a walk-in. I'm not who I was growing up for sure, but yeah, you don't want to take that away from a child, especially. You don't want to judge a child right off the bat like that. Right. So,
or especially somebody that you made a very heartfelt and deep commitment to. You don't want to just throw them in that category without really, really, really.
But there is a spark, though.
There is
a spark in some children, and I didn't realize what this spark was. All I knew is that when Cherie and I first met, I was able to look at a kid and go, that's a bad spirit in that kid. Like there's just this it's not right. It doesn't have that spark. And then there's some kids that I look and I'm like, oh my God, look at that spark. That's freaking amazing. And Cherie was like, I can't believe you would say that about children. Like, how can you say that? How can you say that some children are bad, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. It's just a sense that I get. And, unraveling everything now, it's maybe there's some truth to it. I don't know. But the number one thing that I would stick to is don't deny somebody the ability, the opportunity, especially a child, small consciousness, from blooming to their full potential,
right?
Because of a judgment like that. It's not good. Whether it's NPC or organic consciousness, you can't do that. You've got to treat every child as if they are capable of sparking into this huge, beautiful consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting to me that you've thought for a while that you were a walk-in. What if the body that you have was an NPC and you just literally took over and came in?
I think it was.
When it was grown.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's possible. But then again, thinking back, I always had this kind of spark, and I always had this sense of understanding. Like when I was a kid, my father was always really, really negative. And I knew instinctively, like at 3-4 years old, don't speak like that because you're speaking all this negativity into existence. And I remember just being completely like not sickened, but I'll use that for lack of a better term. There's a better word I'm looking for, but I can't think of it. But I remember being, like sickened when I would hear my father talking like that. I'm like, don't do that. Why are you forming a reality like that? I didn't have the words to say it like that. So there was always that little bit of spark. I don't know.
I don't either, but I do want to just point out that.
And nothing beyond the veil scared me, even as a kid. I mean, it was Ouija boards and literally everything.
And The Exorcist at age 5.
Yeah, I mean, all these things. Yeah, I remember watching The Exorcist, though, thinking to myself, man, that's going to be tough going through life and like not getting possessed by a demon. If this stuff is so prevalent here, like, oh my God, how do you protect yourself against something like
that? Terry Wittini said, trauma may cause a child's sparks, which is their soul, to split off and allow the AI to inhabit an organic avatar. I think that might be true, but I have to choose my words carefully with that, because I think that the programming, like Chris said, it's been really hardcore programming ever since around 1950. Everybody that comes into the world, especially if they come into they live in the United States, they're born and raised in the United States. Yes, absolutely. They're going to be exposed to all kinds of programming, AI programming. And it's actually pretty rare that a child grows up without installing any of those programs and without using any of those programs. I think we all have these programs, and it's part of the growing up process is, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go into the Girl Scout programming, or I'm going to go into the Boy Scout programming, or I'm going to go into the youth group programming, or I'm going to go into the praise and worship team programming, which is that's what I did. And it took a long, long time for me to get some of the things that I inculcated in that programming out of me. Like even Chris, just in the last year or two, I've been able to get rid of the choir girl voice that I was programmed to perform that way. And, Chris had to really get me to pull the music out from deep within myself, because I was so programmed to not feel that. And
the
to
choir,
not be allowed
the choir
to do that.
voice, it's a good voice.
Aww.
But it lacks soul.
It lacks soul,
Yeah.
right. Because every time I would try to use that soul, they would tell me it was bad and get on to me and tell me, okay, well, you need to sound like everybody else. And so slowly I started to inculcate that, and now it's more difficult than it would have been for me to access that soul part of me when I'm singing. So, and that's one thing I'm still working on, even to this day.
Well said. We'll be right back. We're going to take another break, and I think it's final segment on the other side. But we may hang out with you guys and gals a little bit longer, so who knows? We'll be right back.
My dear traveler, remember this. Whatever plane our consciousness may be acting in, both we and the things belonging to the plane are, for the time being, are only realities. However, if we mistake the shadows for realities, we find ourselves confusing the upward progress of the ego as an elevation of consciousness. Thus, beware of oneself when you step beyond the veil.
There's so much going on in the chat. I love each and every one of you. You guys and gals are so freaking awesome. All of our Facebook friends as well. Like, I can honestly say that I've never been happier in the entire time of broadcasting as I am right now. Everybody's so awesome, even the naysayers. I'm picking on somebody in the chat. I said he said Alan Watts, he's like very anti-Mason. And he said Alan Watts is very intelligent. I said, well, Alan Watts was a Mason. What do you think about that? He wasn't really a Mason. So somebody had, I don't know. He could have very well been, but I was just kind of, poking fun. So somebody in the chat room was like, oh, he was a Mason? Go on. I'm like, no, I don't know. I just, I was just poking fun. And then I get this email from one of my friends on Facebook, and she's like, I'm not going to say her name, of course.
Of course. No.
But
privacy.
Yeah. But she said, this is why I was chuckling the whole last segment. She's like, this is what I posted earlier. I get to not only co-host, but I get to perform my personal music and conduct spankings. Oh my God, I'm so excited. And then she writes, I am so sorry. I sent that to everybody instead of to my special friends list.
Oh, so all of her friends. Oh man.
And I'm like, hey, whatever floats your boat. That's perfectly cool. I went to an S&M party one time. And this was when I was like 22 years old and 22, 23. And I was talking to this girl online and I'm like, yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's, et cetera, et cetera. And she's like, all right, well, let's go to a party. I'm going to one on Friday. I'm like, okay, cool. Give me the address. It's like 5 houses down from my house. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, I remember seeing all these people like congregating like
every once in a while,
like every first Friday of the month. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, it must be some party. And I walk in and there's this chick butt naked. She's on a St. Andrew's cross. There's this guy with a bullwhip. Whop-bah! And just like that. So yeah. No, it's, it's explore your sexuality, have fun. But then you get to a point though. You get to a point to where sex becomes sacred and it becomes something completely different than exploring all of the carnal stuff. Then it becomes your twin flame. And that's when things become like the most intense. Like I've never had more intense sexual interactions than with my twin flame.
The energy that we create it's what brings sense to the emotional connection that comes along with sexual activity. It's so much deeper than anything I've ever felt with anybody else that I wouldn't even want to be with anybody else because I wouldn't have that connection. I wouldn't have that joy and that deep understanding of who we are and what we're doing here together and the importance of it. And all of those things, for me anyway, they build this template for making love that couldn't apply to anyone else. It could not. it is something that if I lost Chris, I just wouldn't. There wouldn't be any point to having sex or to going out with anybody else. It just wouldn't even work.
Well, and then like you get to a point where like pheromonal, it's different, and then you're like, that's not my twin. You know, even like hugging people and things like that. I hug everybody.
Yeah.
But you know, you get that pheromone scent from people when you hug them, and it's just like it doesn't feel like my twin, doesn't smell like my twin, the energy's not like my twin, and the game changes.
Yeah, the
whole
thing.
outlook on everything changes. Yeah,
it does. It really does.
Yeah, somebody was posting about open relationships in this group that we're in on Facebook, and they were asking, you know, is it okay to be in an open relationship? What do you think, et cetera, et cetera? And I said, look, the goal is to find one where you could do whatever you want, but then you don't want to do anything else.
Right.
That's the goal there. So find that one.
Yeah, that option, ever since me and Chris first got together, that option has always been on the table for either of us to do whatever we want to do because we don't own each other. We wanted to have a relationship where there wasn't ownership, there wasn't any kind of control that was being manipulated, or either of us manipulating each other using that that control factor. And it's been the case where we don't want to, you know, once you have that freedom set in place, if it's the right one, there's no need, there's no desire for anyone else or anything else, because anything that I want to try, I know he's up for, and anything he wants to try, he knows I'm up for. And it doesn't have to include other people in order for us to fulfill our fantasies. You know, we have really a lot of creativity.
It's a very personal conversation.
Yes,
here.
it is. I'm starting to blush, and I think you are too.
A little bit, yeah. But yeah, there was a point. Maybe this is worth hearing for some people. There was a point when jealousy was a big issue, and for me personally, when jealousy was a big issue, that's when I wanted. Because I mean, I was like of the mindset, like, okay, well, if you're just going to be jealous about every person and everything, I might as well actually go have fun and go actually do something. But then when you were like, you know, just go do whatever you want, I was like, oh, I don't want to do anything now.
No,
it was just like a barking dog on a leash, you know. You're like, the dog doesn't want to go anywhere. They just don't want the freaking leash on them. So you take that leash off, and then all of a sudden, you're like, oh, well, okay. So, you know, think about that. See, maybe people can start seeing relationships a little bit different and see what happens like that.
Right. Somebody once told me it's like a child, especially if you have a toddler who's a boy. He wants to run around and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And so, of course, you want to put him in that playpen so that he stays safe and so that you don't have a child running out in the road or anything like that. If they're in that playpen, they don't want to be in that playpen. Nobody likes to be in a cage. Nobody likes feeling like they can't do what they want to do.
Some people like to be in a cage, obviously.
Obviously. That's pretty hot. But
I told her, I said, we'll hit you up next time we're in your town.
Just ring us up.
No.
But yeah, the child, if you take them out of the playpen and you put them down on the floor next to you, they'll probably stay, and give them a toy to play with. They'll probably stay right there by your feet and not get into any trouble at all. It's that they don't want to be in the cage. Nobody likes to be in a cage. Nobody likes to feel like they're under someone else's control. And so part of this fighting the AI is actually fighting jealousy. Because the AI wants you to be jealous so that you're making the person you're with miserable, and you get to a point where you're just living for the AI programming, and that's it. So
that's very true. I mean, yeah, these don't really seem like beyond the veil topics, but really when you think about it, I mean, what is beyond the veil? Beyond the veil is interacting with each other, interacting with the matrix, understanding each other, understanding the matrix, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing that we ignore sometimes is the fundamental relationships between couples. I mean, it's important. It is. And when you find that connection there, like it's like totally different. Like this is the most unique relationship that I've ever been in. All the other ones seem to be like carbon copies, like, but it was good because I learned a lot from those relationships, and I learned what to do and what not to do, bringing it into this relationship to not make the same mistakes. So I look at the people that I was in relationships with before, and a lot of people think that they have to hate the people that they were in relationships with before. But I talk to them every once in a while. Hey, how you doing? Oh, you've got kids now. Oh, et cetera, et cetera. Because they were very important people who helped teach me a lot about myself, so I can have a better relationship with Cherie.
Well, and we all have these little things that we do that aren't good for us or the person we're with. And even just the way that you argue or the way that you interact with another person that you're in a relationship with, when you get into the twin flame relationship, suddenly you want to do things the right way. You want to not just be in a relationship, you want to actually build something with that relationship and go to places you've never been before, emotionally and spiritually and intellectually. And with Chris, I noticed before I met Chris and got with Chris, there were some things that I did in relationships that I didn't even know I was doing. And then Chris had to show me, hey, this is what you do. And some things he did in old relationships that I had to tell him, hey, wait a second, what are you doing?
Yeah, the ayahuasca helped show me a lot of the behavioral patterns that I picked up as a kid.
Ayahuasca
watching
is a lot
my parents.
Ayahuasca is a lot like therapy. It really is couples therapy. Sometimes it can be used for that. And I think it's better than something like ecstasy, because ecstasy is going to highlight the good things and it's going to make you forget about the bad things until the next day. And then the next day, you're both coming down.
And your serotonin is all gone.
Your serotonin is completely depleted. And you both feel like crap. And the arguments start right back up because you didn't address anything. You didn't even address anything good about the relationship. Not really. I mean, yeah, okay, the sex was great. That's pretty much all that you can get out of MDMA, as far as I could tell, as far as I've experienced myself. But with ayahuasca, you're intertwining with each other. Your souls are intertwining with each other, and you're really shaving off the excess, all the extra stuff in the relationship that's making the relationship less than it could be is shaved off.
Yeah.
And you see the benefit of that, and you want to get rid of those things. And
we
you
both
want
had
to be
a
better.
ton of baggage.
Yes.
And if it wasn't for the ayahuasca, I don't think that we would have been able to deal with all the baggage, because you bring baggage into relationships and think that that's part of you and that you have to maintain that baggage for one reason or another. And being able to identify that and break that. And then, like I said, stuff you don't even realize that you're doing until you make that connection in the ayahuasca realm that, oh, okay, so I saw my father reacting like this. That imprinted upon me. This is why I react like this in certain situations. Oh, I see this whole tether completely tied in. I need to break this tether.
Right. And with me, I realized that the way my parents, for lack of a better term, raised me to act in relationships. If you're sad, you don't talk about it, you take a pill, or you go see a doctor and get antidepressants. Or if you're sad, then do everything but actually talk to the person about what's going on and deal with the problem. And so I had to learn to change my entire way of thinking when there are problems, because I tend to just kind of bottle up and not want to talk about anything, and instead go to the medical industrial complex, or go to a therapist, or basically anything but what actually works. And so I had to really learn too.
Let me address a question from Cosmic Mortality real quick,
Yes.
because I think this is really important.
I want to do that one too.
So, hi guys, can you share your thoughts on the spiritual reasons for being born unattractive young adult female? Thoughts. Thank you. First of all, I have met so many people that looked gorgeous on the outside and just completely destroy that because they don't have anything on the inside, or they are just shitty people. Like, it goes way beyond looks, way, way, way beyond looks. So when you say unattractive, it's hard to gauge exactly what you mean by unattractive, because society's standards of attractive versus not attractive is very different to the spiritually awakened. The spiritually awakened see the entire picture, and it's an energy thing, and it's a spirit thing on when it comes down to it. So first of all, I would get that completely out of your head. Unattractive. That's BS. Second of all, a lot of people, they find beauty in a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be society standard type of body types and things like that. I was just, I was reading a post on Acid Math, and this guy posted a picture without a shirt on. And he's like, I've had body image issues. And so I'm posting this here, and I just want to know what you think. And he had big old belly and all that. And all of these really cute girls, I mean, they were really cute, were writing, "Oh, I'd take you out. I'd wine and dine you. I'm a chubby chaser, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And he was like, "Wow." And I'm like, dude, good for you, man. You know what? I spent so much of my life just kicking myself because, like, when I was a teenager, I was working as a waiter at a strip club where guys danced and women went. And so I was like surrounded by women all the time, and I was young and fit and all of this. And then I gained a little bit of weight and all this. And I spent so many years like hating myself for it that I look back and it's like wasted years. And I see this kid, like probably 21, 22 years old, skipping all of that bullshit and just going right down to loving himself for the way he is. And as a result, what happened is that others started to recognize that within him and were like, no, you look great, et cetera, et cetera. So I was like, wow, this is pretty incredible to watch. And then you also have to consider other factors too. So on a spiritual level, so I got a pretty big belly here. And I used to kick myself for it. And I lost like a ton of weight a couple of years ago. Looked great, felt great, could maintain it. I was trying to do the Christ consciousness thing, carrot dangling in front of me, et cetera, et cetera. Fell, boom, right back to the other side. Undid everything that I did. And I realized that what was happening during that time, both the spiritual awakening and all of the loss of weight and everything, was my ego was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, unbeknownst to me. And I was operating more from a place of ego because I was so thrilled about everything I'd accomplished, et cetera, that it threw me completely and totally off balance. So now I look at myself and I'm like, oh, okay, I understand. Because if I didn't have a big old belly, I might be much more egotistical. Now that I've been able to find that balance, now I think I could function in both ways. But I think that's another thing. Like, we come here, and as your book said, the book that you were reading in the first hour, we come here and we make these choices. Like, okay, so what do we want? Do we want intelligence? Do we want gnosis? Do we want attractiveness? Do we want this and that, et cetera, et cetera? And you have like so much that you can allocate to each one. Just like when you're playing a video game, you're like, okay, I want this power up. I want this power up. Okay, I'm only going to get 2 levels of this power up, 5 levels of this power up, et cetera, et cetera. And we start to formulate our own existence and the way that we're going to walk through this life based on that. So I think a lot of it may have to do with keeping the ego in check too, to find that balance. We're not perfect people. And I would venture to say that organic consciousness does not have the luxury of coming into this world with a perfect body. And perfect bodies, perfect looks, perfect this, perfect that are usually NPC things, and especially clones. Like, we see it physically, like in Hollywood. I think that a lot of the people in Hollywood are clones. And I think what happens is somebody gets famous to a point, and then they have the option to buy a clone, and then the clone goes and does all the work, works for them, and they go off to some freaking island and just spend the rest of their lives making money off of this clone that they've purchased. But, Amir has another thought that you get to a certain point, and it's all clones in Hollywood, but there are some organic consciousness that actually become famous. And at that point, they have to either leave the game or they're killed, and a clone takes over for them because they can't have organic consciousness with such big influence upon the world. So on a spiritual level, I would say that number one, you have to be happy exactly for who you are, how you are, etc. Like I walk into a room sometimes, and all of the girls are looking at me, and Cherie's like, they're all looking at you, and I'm like, checking them out. I don't understand that. I got this big old belly over here, and there's guys who are like really fit and really good looking and all this, and the girls are looking at me, and it's like, okay, so how is this happening? What's changed? I changed myself. What I'm radiating has changed, and people pick up on that energy, and they're like, wow, this is a person I want to be around. This is a really good energy. They love that energy. So again, it goes right back to where you are on the inside. Right. And I can tell you this, just from interacting in the chat room with you, never seen a picture of you, nothing like that. But you are a very, very beautiful person. Gorgeous. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. So restructure that and start looking at yourself when you look in the mirror with the entire picture, not just what you see. And a lot of times our brain naturally creates this really distorted image of ourselves. Horrible image. Yeah. Like this, I used to see myself as like this big, like just blob with like these black under my eyes and like all this stuff. And this is the image that I would have in my mind. And then I would see myself in the mirror and go, hey, wait a minute. I don't look the way that I'm look that bad. Yeah. I don't look the way that I'm thinking about myself in my mind. And then that all started to balance itself out. So that's what I would say. Yeah. And I would agree with that. I think that there have been some of the most, some of the people that I felt the closest to in relationships before I was in a relationship with Chris were the ugliest by society standards. They are the ones that I felt like I could talk with and discuss things, and I didn't feel like there was one though, and he was horrible. He was awful. He was just really selfish and self-centered, and he was, by anyone's standard, the most beautiful guy I'd ever gone out with, and he was so attractive. He was a model for Dickies. He was a Dickies model. And so, okay, he's supposed to be perfect, right? I couldn't find a single thing to talk to him about ever. It was just always weird, awkward silence. And then he said one time while I was in his car, he said, "Oh, don't mind the knives under the seat." And I was like, "What knives?" And he had this huge like carving knife set underneath the seat of the car for some reason. And that freaked me out too bad. And I had to break up with him after that. I just didn't want to go out with him anymore. But yeah, that's how it goes. The most attractive and by society standards, attractive people are some of the worst people, while some of the ugliest are the most beautiful that I've ever met. So I will agree with Chris and say, regardless of the fact that we haven't been able to see you, you are gorgeous, beautiful. Yeah. And then also, like, judging people by their appearance is like judging people by their cars. It's silly. It's silly. Yeah. Like, there could be some really cool people that drive really bad cars, and there's some really shitty people that drive really nice cars. So even thinking about it on that level. Inu Evrento said to not identify with the illusion. Yep. Like, yes, I think that's totally, totally accurate, because I look at my body sometimes and I'm like, I'm so skinny and gross and everything, but I don't identify with this body. This body isn't me. I actually look very different in the real world. And so my body shouldn't be seen as mine. I shouldn't identify with it so much. So that's another point that he made, that
I think was really good.
Well said. Again, you guys and gals are so freaking awesome.
You are amazing.
It's great. I think we'll keep it going a little bit longer.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
Because
fine.
I still have a bunch of questions here from
and I've got
Presto
a few.
One that we never got to.
Presto One, the suffering.
Yeah. So we're about to hit the end of the show on TFR and iHeartRadio, but we are going to be passing it over to Brent Thomas, Paranormal Portal. If you're not subscribed to his YouTube channel, please do. YouTube.com/Paranormal Portal or Paranormal Portal Radio. I think it's Paranormal Portal. And he does a live stream every Wednesdays, but he also does the show on iHeartRadio and TFR on Fridays and Saturdays following us. Great ghost stories and things like that. And for everybody listening on Facebook or watching on Facebook and YouTube, we will keep it going a little bit longer as we step even further beyond the veil. So we will be right back.
Thank you for traveling with us this evening. Meditate on your experience. And remember, reality is merely an illusion. Thus, we wish you pleasant dreams. www.beyondtheveilradio.com
I'm 10 years old.
But I can't lose this war, got a pride of a fallen night. Thought that I was fit to fight for us to be. You gave me life for loving me. Tell me where did we go so wrong?
Raw consciousness does not require a savior, but rather, raw consciousness requires only knowledge of oneself and the power to access it. Remember this, as we unlock an even greater gnosis from beyond the veil.
All right. Let's jump into some overtime. I need to make an overtime intro.
Yeah.
So I'll work on that this week. Ramon is starting to feel the mushrooms. So Ramon, pleasant journeys, my friend. Thank you for joining us, of course. I think he's always tripping when he comes to the chat room. So that's hardcore,
That's
man.
pretty
I
cool.
freaking love it. You are freaking awesome, man. Please let us know what gnosis and self-realizations you come to on your journey. So we got a few more questions. I don't want to keep it going for too much longer because we're both freaking exhausted. But we didn't do a show yesterday, so we figured least we can do is offer
Little
you guys
bit
some overtime. So, Mrs. Geo, anything on the agenda?
What is the? Let me pull it up. Presto One said, what value is there in suffering?
Suffering in hindsight. 100% in hindsight, because when you're going through it, it sucks so bad.
Yeah.
But suffering in hindsight is the catalyst for provoking change. I've often said that if the Garden of Eden story is true, then this God was not benevolent to keep us in the Garden of Eden in a state of constant bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a state of constant bliss, then we are never seeking more because we're perfectly happy with the way things are. So how can we reach enlightenment? How can we find our divinity? How can we tap into our raw consciousness element if we're in a constant state of bliss? So ignorance is bliss, bliss is ignorance. And it rings so true. So we have a little bit of suffering in our lives, and that's the driving force to level up, to seek spirituality, to seek more in life. I mean, I grew up, my mother had cancer when I was like 14, and my father took off. We had no money whatsoever. period, at all. I mean, we grew up in really, really, really bad conditions, especially around that time because mom couldn't do anything. So I came from having absolutely nothing. And that was the driving force later to, hey, start making different decisions than your father did. I told my father, I said, hey, you know, if you got some money, put it in Halliburton. This was like right after 9/11. I'm like, put it in Halliburton. He's like, oh, that's ridiculous. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh, why would you say they're never going to give the contracts to Dick Cheney's company? He's in the government, et cetera, et cetera. And sure enough, the stocks for Halliburton just freaking skyrocketed. Now, why did it skyrocket? Because the Iraq war and everything that they did over there. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing in and of itself, but it was that, you know, he always wanted to play it safe. He always, you know, wanted to do stuff like that. So I learned from that, and I'm like, okay, well, that's the reason why he stayed in that particular type of financial situation, working for a company until he died. Until he retired close to death. I mean, his entire freaking life. He told me one time, I went to his office. He said, you know, I've been staring out this window for 35 years. And I'm like, well, that sucks. That's not what I want to do. I do not want to do that. So, you know, I've taken that and structured life better like that. Threw some money into Bitcoin, threw some money into Litecoin, you know, this and that, et cetera, et cetera. I wish I would have done it several years ago. Things would be completely different now, but, you know, still I had that programming back then of no, don't invest, don't do this, don't do that, et cetera, et cetera. So taking the bad situations and the bad upbringing to create something better in the future. So that's another way that suffering manifests itself into something positive. Your thoughts?
My thoughts on it are that if I hadn't gone through the suffering that I've gone through with my body, then I wouldn't be where I am now, because I would have probably done something completely different with my life had I not needed to wake up to the medical industrial complex. And that's how I got into the quote unquote truther movement. I didn't come in through 9/11 like most people. I came in through the eugenics. My interest in eugenics and what the medical community is doing and has been doing for like 100 years now. It was because my son had a reaction to a vaccine and he almost died. He got pneumonia from an RSV shot. It was an experimental vaccine. And because of that experience and the 5 days of suffering that I watched him go through and that I experienced myself, because, you know, mother is always going to feel just as bad as the baby. And that is what pushed me into the finding this knowledge about eugenics and figuring out what's happening in the world. The suffering, even in the book I was reading earlier, The Game is Life, Life is a Game, even in that reality, before they go into those incarnations, before they go into their lives, before they play the game, they get to choose what's going to happen to them. And this one guy, he was number one player in the world. Out of 1 billion people, he was number one. And he was choosing to be robbed at gunpoint at least twice from the time he turns 40. Yeah, are you going to suffer if you get shot being robbed? Yes, you're going to suffer. But all of it works together to create the masterpiece that is your life. All of these things have to be in order for that masterpiece to be shown. You have to have the sour in order to appreciate the sweet. And I know that the suffering that I've gone through sucked while it was happening, but it always taught me something very important, and it always does teach me something very important, and it makes life better overall.
These are only realizations you can come to in hindsight.
Yes.
When you're going through it, it sucks.
Oh, it's awful.
It sucks freaking bad. So,
yeah.
you know, don't get me wrong on this. These are all hindsight.
I think part of our challenge has been to remind each other that suffering is worth it and it's going to be okay. And we try to remind each other of the hindsight stuff while it's happening, so that we don't get consumed by it. Chris really tried to help me with that when I was going through this shoulder surgery, and there were 8 weeks leading up to it that I was just miserable, and he had to keep reminding me, hey, you know, you are going to be normal again, and you're going to be glad that you did this. and everything's going to be okay. It really is. You just have to have the right mindset. And that's going to be happening. If Chris ever goes through suffering, I'm going to have to be there to do the same thing. Because we only see it hindsight, it's really important for another person to kind of help us remember that it's not going to be like that forever, and that the suffering will end and there's a point to it. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
It does. So that's our perspective. Your perspective may be completely and totally different. And as I've said, it's each person's individual journey. But understanding what I understand now, yeah, everything happens for a reason, and then everything is an opportunity to level up.
Mm-hmm.
The only, and I really mean this, the only bad experiences are those that we don't learn from or don't level up from.
Unplug the Matrix said, I think suffering is pointless. It only helps to feed the psychic vampires that feed off of our energy.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying go out there and
pursue it.
Pursue it. No, but shit happens in life. I mean, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day is shit happens.
Mm-hmm.
So when shit happens, how do you handle it? That's the question. I think that's the empowering aspect of this viewpoint is that how do you handle it?
Mm-hmm. Right. Inu Averin said, pain is being in the body. Yes, 100% yes. I can speak from experience on this. If you stay in the body and you focus on the body, then yes, the suffering will just get worse and worse and worse and worse until you feel like you don't want to be in the body at all anymore. And the trick is to leave the body, whether it's meditation, whether it's ayahuasca, whether it's prayer, I don't care what it is, but whatever is going to get you out of the body and let the mind rest, because the mind really is being assaulted too. When the body is being assaulted with pain, the mind feels it too, and you can't get past just basic survival stuff if your body's constantly in pain. So what I found works for me anyway is to get out of the body completely. Ayahuasca is the main way that I am able to do that. Get out of the body, even for a couple of hours, and then you're able to look at the body from from an outside perspective and say, oh, okay, well, I think this is what's wrong. I'm going to change this about the body construct, and then it'll start to act better.
Yeah, and there's some people that are in serious pain 24 hours a day. I'm not discounting that whatsoever, but I think that a lot of pain that we experience can be combated by mind over matter, and by and the body's a self-healing organism. That's what's interesting about this. Like I remember I had this toothache, right? And it hurt so bad for like a week. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. The root died and it stopped. And then like 2 or 3 years later, I wound up getting a root canal and getting a crown on there. But I remember the pain. It was almost like the body was like, okay, it hurts. I'm giving you these signals that something is wrong. But if there's nothing you can do about these signals, then I'm going to stop these signals that are being sent. So, consider that too. There's a possibility. And again, I'm not discounting anybody's experiences that are in pain 24 hours a day, but there is a mind over matter element that can be implemented in certain cases.
And whatever you focus on, it even says it in the Bible, whatsoever a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Whatever you focus on, whatever you put, especially if you're putting emotional focus on things, is going to become your reality in one sense or another. And it can turn into your reality in a good way, such as, finding a support group that actually does help you learn to get out of the body when you're in pain, versus continuing to take pills or continuing to see doctors that aren't helping you over and over and over again.
Here's the thing about pain meds is that pain meds dull the pain receptors. But then once those pain receptors are no longer dull, then they're hyperactive. So you take pain medication to alleviate pain, but at the same time you're making your pain worse because it's a never-ending cycle like that. And you dull them out, then they become hyperactive, more and more and more hyperactive. And then it gets to a point to where it's like you stub a toe and it feels like your freaking arm is falling off. So, consider that too. If you're running to pain medication for just anything, I mean, even Tylenol, Advil, things like that. Like when I have a really bad headache, every once in a while I'll take an naproxen or something. But for the most part, I just try to just focus and just say, okay, this is going away. This is going away. I have control over this, et cetera, et cetera. And my pain tolerance is way, way, way high. Like, I mean, I cut my finger down to the bone as I was cutting some fish one time, and I had that fillet knife, sliced my finger down to the bone, and I'm just like, shit. And Cherie's like, oh my God, there's blood everywhere. What are we going to do?
Get stitches.
Yeah. And I'm like, it's okay. And then Lucky, like, it was like, put some super glue on it. You'll be fine. I'm like, all right. So Cherie cleaned it out real good, put super glue on it. And funny enough, I have a scar from when I was a kid where I cut my finger to the bone again as I was in Cub Scouts, and I was whittling a piece of wood and I didn't know how to use a knife and slice my finger. I have this huge scar right here on my thumb. But this other one that I healed with super glue, no scar at all. Funny how that works.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. As I've gotten older, the scars from surgeries and things like that, they seem to be like nothing compared to what they were when they first happened. Like when I had the intussusception and I had to have an open laparotomy where they open up your stomach completely and they have to take everything out and then put it back in. That was traumatic for my body, but if you looked at my body now, you wouldn't even think that I'd gone through that except for a tiny little scar about that big. It's almost as if the body wants to forget about pain and it wants to forget about being in pain and hurting, but it's our minds that keep it going a lot of the time. So
pain sucks. It's one of the things about the Matrix that sucks hardcore. But it's one of the things that draws you further into the Matrix, because when you're in pain, that's when the Matrix becomes its realist.
The Matrix has you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other topics?
Let's see. I don't have any other topics, I don't think.
I have a few questions here that Presto1 asked earlier. If we have reincarnated enough times through every possible life and timeline, eventually the memory wipe would lose its luster and would restore eventually everything would lose its luster and the memory wipe would restore novelty back to the experiences. What do you think about that?
I'm sorry, I was trying to find more questions.
Oh, okay. So we live enough lifetimes without a memory wipe, and then at some point we actually want a memory wipe because it brings novelty back into the experiences. What do you think about that? Do you think we choose memory wipes at one point? It's possible.
It's possible.
It's definitely possible.
But I would like to think no, simply because what if you make mistakes in that incarnation, in that game that you're playing? What if you make mistakes that can't be rectified and that can't be undone, and the people that you're interacting with are going to interact with you in further incarnations, and what you did in that particular incarnation is going to bleed over. Even if you remember your next incarnation, you remember the one before it, there's still going to be that betrayal, or there's going to be that mistake that you can't really undo. I don't know.
I'm reading Justin's comment here. He said, once I had a bad toothache for days. Then I said to myself, I create my own reality. So this can be solved. I imagined it over. The next morning I woke up with my tooth next to me.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well done, brother.
Yeah.
Well done. That is hardcore.
That is hardcore.
So that's next level shit right there.
Wow. That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love you guys. Y'all come up with the best perceptions.
Again, Presto1 asked, how important to beating the game is the distraction of
Distinction.
the distinction of OC people versus AI people.
The OC.
The OC. Oh,
The
nice.
organic consciousness.
That's what we're gonna call it. Yeah, the
The
OC.
OC.
The OC squad.
The OC squad. Just talking.
So, what do you think?
I think that that could very well be the case. Can you read it one more time? The distinction between them.
How important to beating the game is
Okay.
distinguishing between the organic consciousness and AI people.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be important in the sense that you kind of carve your life around just OC people, because I still think that some of the NPCs are here to help, give us a clue or put us back on the right path, or, make sure we don't take a wrong turn at one point or another. Even if it's somebody that's awful and that, does something absolutely horrible, not even to you, but to other people, you see that and you say, oh, I was just about to do something like that. I'm not going to do that now. And so even like World Star and things like that are there. There's a purpose. It's to teach you what not to do and to teach you what to stay away from. And the distinction between the two should really only be when you're considering close friendships and relationships and who you consider family, real family, like your soul family. I think it does need to be the distinction made between the AI and the OC. But otherwise, I think we should be treating NPCs exactly the same way as we treat organic consciousness, just so they can learn. Maybe they'll learn something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question was more of the context of what is the importance of being able to distinguish between the two. And I was actually reading a couple of comments, so I didn't catch everything you said. But what I would say is the biggest importance is for your own consciousness, to understand when an NPC is in your sphere, perhaps pushing you on a different path, different way of thinking, et cetera, rather than, that's why I always say the only place you can get answers is inside of yourself. Mm-hmm. That's the only trustworthy information, because anything external is always subject to question, and other people's paths are not necessarily what's right for you. Mm-hmm. It's so individualized that it's made me rethink literally everything. I mean, I was just talking to somebody about shamans in the Amazon on that ayahuasca group, and I was like, look, you can go down to an ayahuasca retreat, but it's an individual path. That shaman is not you. So you know what you need. Mm-hmm. The shaman doesn't know. The shaman knows how to do a ritual. He knows how to do the same thing over and over and over and over again for everybody. There is no special individual path, but right. It is an individual path.
Mm-hmm. It has to be an individual path, or you're being led. And when you're being led, you're not in the driver's seat. You're not in control of what's happening to your consciousness. And that's the main thing, is be in charge of your own consciousness. That's step one. And then you can worry about realizing your divinity and all of that. I think the number one, though, is to get a hold of your own consciousness and hold on to it. Resonance Creative said, I was just at a bar with an NPC narcissist. Says he was there on 9/11 and my theory was wrong. No one got hurt. Nobody died. Everything we know is a lie. He was a full-on truther. Thoughts? Can NPCs be full-on truthers?
The truther programming is a program.
Yeah,
so
it's a very, very
I've
strong
come to
program.
realize that, and it's a very, very strong program, and you can look at it from several different perspectives. Paid shills. I hate using the word shill, but paid shills, agents, et cetera, pushing a particular narrative, a particular thing. I mean, as I've said before with 9/11 Truth, and again, I don't care enough about it to actually find out what is going on. But I do know that I went through the whole truth programming when it came to 9/11, and I've come to question even the truth programming itself. Was the government behind it, et cetera, et cetera? Or could it be that there was an event that the government was out of control of, and because they were out of control of it, they are the ones that crafted the narrative and the conspiracy in order to make people believe that they had total control over everything at all times. So on that note too, you have to wonder too, these narratives that are being pushed, can they be misdirection? Can they be cover stories to try to actually cover something up? Because whether you believe the official story or a cover story, any way it goes, you're not getting to the truth of whatever it is. And you could have these NPC type of characters, and they don't even realize they're NPCs. They just are just spouting a bunch of pre-programmed stuff, but they're trying to push a narrative in one direction or another. So you have all these different levels. You wake up to the official story, you've got another narrative here, another narrative here, another narrative here. So the more awakened you get, you're still trapped in one of their narratives, so far as you don't come to the realization that you're divine and that everything resides inside of you and that you are the ultimate creator of your reality. I think any narrative is just fine for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and weren't you just talking the other day or this morning or yesterday about the Jeff Sessions and cannabis thing being a huge distraction from something you think might be happening?
Yeah, and I don't want to say this with certainty, but I've been looking at everything that's been going on a political level, and I hate getting political because it's all freaking theater. Everything is theater. Like, nothing we see is real, and that's why when we were doing the truth thing, when we were covering news and all this, we were basically just parroting what the mainstream media was saying and maybe bringing a different angle or different perspective to it. But that's why we veer away from this kind of stuff. But you have Jeff Sessions right now, who's on this anti-cannabis war, and you can't put that genie back in the bottle. There's no way. It's freaking impossible. They don't have the resources to do it. Like, they don't have enough employees, federal employees, to physically go down and shut down every single freaking dispensary and every single fucking... Yeah, I guess I can say fucking. We're not on iHeart anymore. And
Yeah,
every
we're
single fucking state. It's impossible. But they want people focused on that over and over and over and over again. And the first thing that came to my mind was kratom. They want people focused on cannabis, freaking out about cannabis, so they can slide in their kratom prohibition, which is what they've been trying to do. But then it gets even deeper than that, because I'm seeing like even new age outlets picking up on this idea that there are mass arrests being going on right now with the cabal. And there was some stuff going on in Saudi Arabia where people were being killed and officials were being removed from office, et cetera, et cetera. And it sounds good on the surface. Like, yeah, great, take the cabal down, et cetera, et cetera. But if you think about it on an even deeper level, is it possible that the Jeff Sessions things is a huge distraction to distract not only for the kratom prohibition, but if these arrests are actually taking place, which for the first time, for the last 5-6 years, we've heard David Wilcock and Ben Fulford saying, "Oh yeah, the cabal is being arrested, et cetera, et cetera," and it's been a complete and total fucking bullshit. But right now, we actually have all of these indictments that are anonymous indictments that we have no idea what they're for, but it seems like high-level politicians are in fact being arrested now. That sounds, again, like a good thing on the surface, but I have to look beyond the veil and I have to see things from a 360-degree perspective. How can something like that be nefarious? It feels like there may be a coup d'etat taking place right now that nobody is aware of. And the reason that I'm feeling that is because none of this is publicized. If Trump or the Trump administration or the powers that are working with Trump are actually working for the people, they would publicize this kind of stuff, not keep this stuff so underground and so hush-hush, which smells like a coup. Now, it could be great. It could be, the next best thing since freaking sliced bread. I'm not taking that off the table. But it could be something even worse than what we have now coming up the pike. So you have to consider these things in these 360-degree perspectives, which I don't hear anybody talking about. All I hear is the conspiracy narrative being repeated over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So something to consider. Doesn't affect my immediate sphere right now, doesn't affect the sphere of many people out there, unless we have freaking soldiers at our door. It's not really going to affect us in that way. So, whatever happens in the political theater happens in the political theater. There's nothing we can do about it anyway it goes. I mean, we could scream it from the roofs and it's not going to change anything. The political play is going to play out the way it is, but it's a different way of looking at things instead of through those conspiracy goggles or mainstream goggles.
Yes. And I don't even think about this kind of stuff. Even the kratom thing and even the Jeff Sessions cannabis thing, I don't feel connected to it at all. I've gotten to the point where any news item, as soon as I start to hear words that indicate that it's a news story, I just check out completely, because I realize that my consciousness only has room for so much. And if I put too much news and material information in there, then I'm not going to have enough room for the astrology, for BTV, for meditation, for playing with my twin, for,
Well, it comes
living my
down
life.
to taking care of yourself first and foremost.
Mhm.
Your consciousness has to be right before you can try to change the global consciousness. Just simple as that. And we forget that on this truth path. And I was just talking to somebody the other day, and he was screaming about all these crimes against children, and he was doing it in a very, very, very vile way. And I'm like, look, man. And he wasn't getting a response from people. And he's like, I want to kick people in the teeth with truth, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like,
You can't
dude,
kick people in the
you
teeth.
can't. People don't want to be kicked in the freaking teeth. It's simple as
Even
that.
if for a good reason.
Yeah, they don't want to be kicked in the teeth. And it's like, okay, you have to make sure your consciousness is good first and foremost before you can change somebody else's consciousness. That's why you're not getting a response, because your consciousness isn't right first. What are you filling your consciousness with? You're filling your consciousness with all these crimes against children and all these horrible things that are completely and totally out of your control. What can you control in your own consciousness, and how can you change yourself first? Once we see that change, then change will start to spread outwards, but it's got to start from inside first and foremost.
We all move a rock. You can't move a mountain, but if everybody picks up a rock from that mountain and moves it, then collectively we will move the mountain.
But I was in that programming too. That's the thing.
Too.
I was there. Like I didn't know all this. I look back at our.
I wasted so much time.
Yeah, wasted time. Everything progressed to this point. Everything was a stepping stone. I know that, but it's a different way of thinking, and I think it's a more mature way of looking at the world. It's a more mature way of looking at consciousness and not setting yourself up for failure. That's the biggest thing. Not setting yourself up for failure.
Well, and that's the whole Christ consciousness thing. We've discussed this many times on the show, that the idea of Christ consciousness is kind of like that idea where you try and you try and you try and you try, but you're trying something that cannot be done. It cannot be accomplished. You're not going to stop the rape from happening. You're not going to stop children being taken away from their parents. You're not going to be able to stop those things. And to try and to just turn off everyone that might listen to you by saying things like you're saying them, it's just a waste of time. It really is. Justin Van Leeuwenhoek said, I think the only way to beat the AI is realizing you create reality. Because in rational ways, the AI will always win. You can only beat it spontaneously. I think that's a very, very good point. If you don't realize that you're creating the reality around you, then of course you're going to always follow whatever seems like the best option at the time, instead of actually creating your own reality. You are the creator of your own reality, but when you don't realize that you're the creator, that creator spot goes to the AI instead. And then the AI gets to determine what events happen in your life and how they end up and all of that. But if you can realize you're actually the creator, then it makes defeating the AI so much easier.
Do you think the Gnostics of old were onto the system of AI, but we just have a language barrier to what they could explain for their first time? Absolutely, 100%. This is what Seasider said in the chat. I agree with you wholeheartedly. They knew it, but they couldn't explain it because they didn't have the technology. This is why this is such a beautiful time, because we have computers, we have everything here and an understanding of computer code, computer systems, how computers work, matrices, virtual reality. This is the perfect moment. And as Tanner said, I think we all agree to come back at this perfect moment, because these systems have not overtaken this matrix yet, because as above, so below, they will overtake this matrix eventually. But we came at this perfect time to where we can understand these, and despite the memory wipe, these are sparking understandings in our minds, and they're sparking these memories that the memory wipe took away when we agreed to come back into this freaking matrix. So yes, I think you are 100% spot on. But on the same note, this is why I don't take to heart too much of what the Gnostics said, or the Native Americans, or anything like that, because they didn't have that full understanding because of the language barrier. So we are coming to the same conclusions, but we are taking things so much deeper and so much more beyond the veil than the Gnostics. And so I think the gnosis that we're bringing in from ourselves, and the gnosis that we're coming up with as we're all forming community together, I think it's way, way, way more valuable than what is written in a book 1,000 years ago. I was actually having a conversation about this very fact, about this very topic with somebody just a couple of days ago, and he was trying to tell me that I didn't know what I was talking about, because this book from 1,000 years said this, and this book from 2,000 years said this, and this book from 100 years said this. And I'm like, well, this is all the more reason why you need to go inside and get the answers from inside. We can't take what they wrote 1,000 years ago as gospel, but we can definitely look to them as clues, and as with the understanding and discernment first and foremost, because again, limited understanding, you're going to get a limited gnosis. But now that we have a full understanding, or fuller understanding, we are going to come up with much better conclusions. Your thoughts?
I completely wholeheartedly agree. I don't have anything to add to that, except yeah.
There's a moon eclipse at the end of the month.
Yeah, I read that. There's a moon eclipse at the end of the month. I need to read up more on that before I can really talk about it, but it's going to be interesting. The Astro Watch for that week is going to be very interesting indeed. So
we'll have to check the stars.
Yeah.
And see.
I'll have to consult.
Yes.
The stars, and maybe even the tarot.
So on that note, anything else?
I think
on the twin agenda.
I think I'm getting a little tired. It's been a long week, but a really great week for us, and we hope it was a great week for you, and we hope you enjoyed the broadcast tonight.
Oh, Justin's got some harmalas extracting in the kitchen.
Oh,
Changa. Dude, you have to tell us about Changa, because it's I've never worked with Changa before, so I'll have to do some research on it. But to my understanding, you extract the harmalas and the DMT, mix them together. See, I've heard different ways. Like you infuse the DMT within actual plant material of like the ayahuasca vine or something.
That's a good idea.
And then I don't know, but interesting. So we'll have to give that a try for sure.
Yes,
and
we will.
I'm curious and interested to know how it is compared to ayahuasca
and compared to regular DMT.
Yeah, in the sense that DMT freaking blasts you off, where ayahuasca takes you a little bit slower. If we can find that happy medium where you're still blasted off as deep, maybe through Changa, but it's a little bit slower than DMT and a little longer lasting, I think that would be perfect.
That would be perfect, yes. So let us know how it goes for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's it.
I think that's it, you guys.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. We love each and every one of you. And I hate to say goodbye, because there's chatter in the chat room. There's people active and listening and, feeling everything. But we're getting into the 4-hour mark now, which, I think it's time to go play with the twin, too.
I think it is, too.
Yeah. So love ya. And we'll see you next week. We're going to try to commit to the Friday show more often.
Yeah.
But comment, like, subscribe. If you subscribe to the channel, then you get the notifications on when we do the live shows. And sometimes we do them Sunday nights just because we feel bad about missing Friday. And so we're like, yeah, we need to do one on Sunday. So maybe we'll do one tomorrow night too. But in order to get notified of that, subscribe to youtube.com/beyondtheveil, or you can follow Cherie and I on Facebook, which is facebook.com/ChrisGeo Show and facebook.com/CherieGeo. And we also have facebook.com/Beyond the Veil, but we really don't keep it updated too much. Facebook has some funky algorithms, and they don't actually show the post to people that like the pages anymore. It's like I think it's down to like 7% of people that like your page actually see your posts.
Yeah, it's gone
so
bad.
it's I mean the Facebook pages has become basically worthless, and that's why we're kind of sticking to the profile.
YouTube. Yeah.
But what we do also is, because we're limited to 5,000 people on our Facebook pages, we remove the people, like especially the truther people, like we remove them regularly, and people that aren't really active or sharing or stuff like that, because we want to build the community of Beyond the Veil people. And so if we accidentally remove you at any point, we apologize, but just send us a friend request again. So love you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Love you guys. We'll see you either tomorrow or next week. Love you.